The ocean has always been a paradox, at once intimate and unknowable. For centuries it has fed civilizations, carried ships across continents, and mirrored the changing moods of the sky. Yet beyond its glittering surface lies a frontier more alien than the planets circling our sun. The deep ocean remains a darkness not just of absence, but of impossibility. Here, pressure crushes with the weight of mountains, temperatures hover near freezing, and light disappears into nothingness just a few hundred meters down. This realm is not simply hidden, it resists intrusion. Even the most advanced technology fractures against its silence, and even the boldest explorers are forced back by the sheer indifference of its physics. What we call the deep sea is not merely a place but a boundary, an invisible line that separates what can be touched from what must remain imagined. In this abyss, life survives through strategies no land-born creature could endure. Organisms glowing with their own bioluminescent lanterns, predators whose jaws unfold like traps of bone and shadow, microbial colonies thriving on chemicals instead of sunlight. And still, these are only fragments, whispers caught in the beams of submersibles that flicker in and out like falling stars. The central question lingers. Why, after mapping the surface of Mars in high resolution, do we remain blind to most of our own planet's depths? The answer lies not in neglect, but in the limits of being human. The ocean does not yield to curiosity, it swallows it whole. This is the dark side of the ocean, why we can't truly explore the deep. You're watching Arcane Skies. If this journey stirs something in you, consider subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing in the comments where and when you are watching. The abyss waits, and together we will listen for its echoes. The first descent into the unknown always begins with silence. Imagine a vessel leaving the surface, its steel frame trembling as it slips below the waves. Sunlight fractures into bands of gold, then dissolves into green, before surrendering to a blue so dense it feels almost solid. Within minutes the brilliance of the upper ocean fades, and what remains is a twilight where shadows reign. This zone, known as the mesopelagic, stretches from about 200 to 1,000 meters deep. Here, light is faint and scattered, never strong enough to nourish plants, yet sufficient to sustain strange, elusive creatures that drift like spirits in the gloom. Lanternfish, with scales that glimmer like sequins, rise in massive migrations each night, their movement considered the largest daily migration of life on Earth. Predators with oversized eyes, built to harvest every photon, drift through the haze, waiting for signals of weakness in the endless dark. But the descent does not stop here. Beyond 1,000 meters lies the bathypelagic, a place of perpetual night where sunlight never touches. Pressure mounts relentlessly. At this depth, the weight pressing against the hull of a submersible equals thousands of pounds per square inch, as though the vessel were being clenched in the grip of an invisible giant. For humans, even a crack no thicker than a strand of hair would mean catastrophe. Yet for the creatures here, the crushing force is simply the texture of existence. Their bodies have no air-filled cavities to collapse, no bones brittle enough to snap. Instead, they flow with the water itself, soft-bodied and ethereal, like apparitions stitched from jelly and silence. And still deeper lies the Abyssal, a realm stretching 4,000 to 6,000 meters below the surface. The word abyss itself comes from the Greek abyssos, meaning without bottom, a word humans invented to describe what could not be measured. It is here that the ocean feels most like outer space, not because of emptiness, but because of the overwhelming presence of darkness. The temperature hovers near freezing, barely above the point at which salt water solidifies, yet hydrothermal vents rupture from the sea floor, spewing fluids hotter than molten lava. Around these vents cluster entire ecosystems built not on sunlight, but on chemistry. Bacteria feasting on hydrogen sulfide, tube worms stretching meters long with blood-red plumes, ghostly crabs grazing as if on invisible pastures. To human eyes, these landscapes seem apocalyptic, yet they are cradles of survival, proving that life does not need the sun to endure. Reaching these depths demands not just courage, but engineering bordering on the impossible. For every 10 meters of descent, pressure increases by 1 atmosphere, a force so relentless that by the time a vessel reaches the deepest trenches, the strain surpasses 1,000 times the pressure at sea level. Metal bends, glass implodes, electronics fail. The Challenger Deep, the lowest known point on Earth, swallows all who dare with pressures greater than those found on the surface of Venus, and yet a handful of machines and a handful of humans have dared. Trieste, a bathyscaphe launched in 1960, descended nearly 11 kilometers, its hull groaning like the timbers of an ancient ship. The window through which Don Walsh and Jacques Picard peered was no wider than a dinner plate, and even then it threatened to shatter. When they touched the bottom, they saw nothing but silt stirred up like smoke in a forgotten chamber. It was proof not of triumph, but of how much remained hidden. To imagine these depths is to imagine a cathedral built from shadow and pressure. Walls of blackness stretch in every direction, the only illumination the sparks of bioluminescence, tiny organisms flickering like constellations. Each flash is both a signal and a trap, communication and camouflage. A predator's lure glows to entice prey, while prey flashes to confuse a predator. In this eternal night, light is the most precious weapon, and survival is a game of illusions. Some creatures glow with patterns that mimic the faint starlight above, erasing their own outline so they cannot be seen from below. Others emit pulses in ultraviolet, wavelengths invisible to most but decipherable by their kin. This language of light has evolved into one of the most sophisticated systems of communication on the planet, hidden far from human eyes. And yet, for all its richness, this realm rejects exploration. The ocean floor is a shifting desert of mud and bone, scattered with the remains of whales, fish, and ancient shells drifting down in a perpetual rain called marine snow. Each flake is a particle of death and decay, and yet it is also sustenance, feeding the scavengers that crawl across the sediment. Giant isopods, creatures resembling armored beetles the size of puppies, trudge across the seafloor, their legs moving with an eerie slowness. Hagfish knot themselves to tear into carcasses, their bodies writhing like smoke-made flesh. And when a whale dies, its fall creates an oasis. A whale fall where hundreds of species gather to feast for decades, from sharks stripping flesh to microbes breaking down the last molecules of bone. Here, death is not an end but a beginning, a cycle without sentiment. The more humanity peers into these regions, the more alien they seem. The physics of survival here have no parallels on land, no metaphors that fit neatly within human experience. Evolution in the deep has been shaped not by competition for sunlight or fertile ground, but by silence, patience, and endurance against weight and time. Some fish have antifreeze proteins in their blood, keeping them alive in waters that would otherwise turn their cells into shards. Others store energy so efficiently that they can survive for years without eating, waiting for a single meal to drift into reach. It is an existence measured not in days or seasons, but in centuries. For some corals and sponges here are older than the pyramids, older than writing itself, bearing witness to a history no human has recorded. What we call exploration is, at best, a brief intrusion. Cameras mounted on submersibles flicker for a few hours before retreating, their batteries drained, their hulls too fragile to linger. Remote-operated vehicles crawl across the seabed, but cannot map more than fragments. Each image brought back is a window, not a door. The abyss tolerates observation, but never entry. What lies beyond the beams of artificial light remains cloaked, a reminder that the Earth still contains a frontier immune to conquest. And so the descent, while astonishing, always ends in retreat. Steel vessels rise back toward the surface, shaking off the weight of the sea, their hulls steaming as if exhaling relief. The explorers return with stories of darkness and fleeting glimpses, but they know they have touched only the edges of a vast silence. The deeper they go, the more the mystery grows. The question lingers like a ripple spreading outward. If the ocean holds landscapes where life thrives without sunlight, what other unseen worlds might exist, not only on this planet, but beyond it? As the vessel surfaces and air rushes once again into lungs, the mystery does not dissolve, it deepens. And the horizon, instead of closing the chapter, invites the thought of what waits below the next descent. The surface of the ocean may shimmer like a mirror of the sky, but beneath its calm lies a realm that challenges even the most sophisticated technology. To understand why true exploration of the deep remains elusive, one must first consider the physical barriers that guard it. Pressure is the most unforgiving. Every 10 meters of descent adds another atmosphere of force, as if invisible hands are layering the ocean's weight upon every bolt and seam of a vessel. At 4,000 meters, the crushing power is unimaginable, equivalent to balancing an elephant on every square inch. Machines are designed to endure, yet endurance has limits. The Challenger, submersible, one of the deepest diving vehicles, required hulls thicker than any conventional material could sustain, and still, the margin for error was razor thin. The deep does not forgive mistakes. It annihilates them instantly. Yet pressure is not the only adversary. The absence of light renders navigation a battle against blindness. Human eyes are useless here, and even the most advanced cameras struggle. Light beams scatter in turbid waters, illuminating only fragments of what exists, leaving most of the environment cloaked in permanent shadow. To compensate, sonar, sound waves bouncing through the abyss, paints rough outlines of terrain. But sonar is blunt, a sketch where detail dissolves. Jagged ridges, trenches, and volcanic mountains appear as silhouettes, never as complete portraits. For every map drawn of the ocean floor, there are thousands of kilometers left blank, a cartography of absence that mocks human ambition. Temperature, too, becomes a quiet adversary. In the deep sea, water rarely rises above 4 degrees Celsius, just above freezing. Electronics slow, metals become brittle, and lubricants thicken into sludge. Machinery, no matter how advanced, begins to betray its makers in the cold. Only near hydrothermal vents, where superheated fluids erupt from cracks in the crust, does warmth exist, but it is violent, boiling, and toxic. These vents create small sanctuaries for life, but lethal hazards for machines, corroding metal and frying circuits. The ocean seems to allow survival only to the organisms sculpted by its extremes, while rejecting human tools at every turn. Beyond physics, there is scale. The ocean is vast, covering more than 70% of Earth's surface, with depths that swallow the tallest mountains. To explore it thoroughly would require fleets of submersibles, each capable of traversing a space larger than all the continents combined. Yet even with satellites and autonomous drones, only about 20% of the seafloor has been mapped with high resolution. The rest remains unknown, a canvas of mystery stretching further than imagination. Humanity speaks of exploration, but in truth, most of the deep has not even been glimpsed. Consider the Mariana Trench, a scar in the Pacific descending nearly 11 kilometers. It is deeper than Everest is tall, a wound in the Earth's crust carved by tectonic collision. Only a handful of descents have reached its bottom, each requiring extraordinary effort. And what was found? A desert of silt, punctuated by life so sparse it seemed unreal. Amphipods, shrimp-like creatures with transparent shells, swim here, their bodies infused with chemicals that keep them alive under crushing pressure. Microbes feed on the trickle of organic debris sinking from above, shaping an invisible ecosystem sustained by death falling from the surface world. In this place, life is not abundant but patient, surviving on almost nothing, enduring in conditions that would annihilate surface dwellers within moments. To peer into such depths is to witness a form of time that feels foreign. Life here evolves slowly, shaped not by seasons but by millennia. Many deep-sea creatures have changed little over tens of millions of years, their forms fossil-like, as if evolution itself has slowed to a crawl under the immense weight. A six-gilled shark prowling the deep looks almost identical to its ancestors from the age of dinosaurs. Fragile glass sponges with skeletons made of silica may live for thousands of years, filtering water in silence while civilizations rise and fall on the surface. The ocean floor becomes not just a space but a museum of endurance, a living archive that preserves ancient patterns of survival. But while these organisms endure, human attempts to study them are fleeting. Submersibles can only remain below for a few hours, sometimes less. The energy required to resist pressure, provide oxygen, and maintain function drains quickly, forcing premature retreat. Remote-operated vehicles, ROVs, extend missions slightly, but they are tethered to ships above, their movements clumsy in currents. Autonomous drones, untethered and free, are limited by their batteries, often forced to return long before mapping is complete. Every glimpse is brief, like a flashlight flickering in a cavern too vast to comprehend. The ocean does not resist exploration with hostility, but with indifference. Its laws are immutable, its scale incomprehensible, its conditions indifferent to ambition. The very act of descending is an encounter with boundaries, each layer of depth a reminder of human fragility. And fragility is not just physical, but psychological. Inside submersibles, explorers are confined to spheres no larger than a closet, sealed for hours in silence, broken only by mechanical hums. Outside the window, nothing but darkness, a void so complete it can feel like floating in eternity. The human mind, built to navigate landscapes of light and horizon, struggles with such infinite night. Even the most experienced divers speak of unease, of a silence that presses as heavily as the water itself. This psychological weight mirrors a deeper truth, that perhaps the ocean cannot be conquered in the way mountains are climbed or deserts crossed. Mountains rise into the air, visible from afar, their summits inviting ascents. Deserts stretch into horizons, their emptiness daring survival. But the deep sea hides itself, folding into the Earth's own body. To reach it is not to scale or traverse, but to surrender, to descend into a place where survival is temporary, where observation is always partial. Still, the desire persists. Humans send machines again and again, knowing they will return with fragments rather than full portraits. A handful of images, a few minutes of footage, a specimen caught in a net rising through pressure that warps its body until it resembles little of its living form. Yet even these fragments reshape understanding. The discovery of hydrothermal vents in 1977 overturned the belief that all ecosystems depended on sunlight. The observation of colossal squid confirmed myths whispered by sailors for centuries. Each glimpse proves that the unknown is not empty, but alive, not barren, but brimming with strange logic. And still, one question deepens with every attempt. If this is what exists in the thin margin we have managed to glimpse, what lies in the vastness we have not touched? The trenches, the plains of mud, the volcanic ridges stretching for thousands of miles, are they filled with creatures whose forms rewrite biology? Or are they deserts of silence? Each expedition is both revelation and provocation, opening the door wider yet revealing how small the light truly is against such darkness. It is this paradox that defines the ocean's dark side. It reveals just enough to entice, yet withholds its fullness. And as explorers ascend back to the surface, carrying samples and footage, they cannot shake the feeling that the ocean has shown them only what it chose, as if guarding its secrets with a patience longer than any human endeavour. Perhaps that is why the deep resonates so powerfully in myth and imagination. It is not just a place, but a symbol of boundaries, of what cannot be fully grasped. As the vessel surfaces and daylight floods once more, the contrast is overwhelming. The surface world feels fragile in its clarity, while beneath, an infinity waits unseen. The question lingers, silent but insistent. If we cannot master what lies beneath our own oceans, how can we dream of exploring other worlds? That question does not fade as the waves close over the wake of the ship. Instead, it presses forward, pulling the imagination into darker waters, where the greatest mysteries remain untold. The ocean has long been called Earth's final frontier, yet this frontier does not lie at the edge of maps, but directly beneath our feet, beneath the shifting, glittering surface. To stand on the deck of a ship and gaze outward is to encounter vastness. But the true mystery is not the horizon. It is the depth beneath that horizon, the thousands of meters of water where light cannot reach. The further one descends, the more reality bends into something almost otherworldly, and with each layer, the rules of survival change. Pressure, cold, and darkness sculpted creatures whose forms defy expectation. To glimpse them is to question the limits of biology itself. Consider the gulper eel, with its vast hinged jaw that unrolls like a sail to swallow prey much larger than its own thin body, or the anglerfish, whose bioluminescent lure dangles like a lantern in front of teeth sharper than glass. These predators exist where scarcity demands ingenuity, each adaptation a radical answer to a relentless question. How to live when the very fabric of the environment resists life? Many deep-sea fish have gelatinous bodies with few bones, allowing them to resist crushing pressures. Others have no pigments, their skins pale and translucent. For what need is there for camouflage when no light can betray them? In the Hadal zone, the trenches plunging deeper than 6,000 meters, some amphipods contain aluminum in their shells, a mineral gift drawn from the ocean floor itself to protect them from the dissolving effects of extreme pressure. Life here is fragile yet unyielding, and its endurance hints at something profound. The existence of ecosystems at hydrothermal vents revealed that life can thrive without the sun, powered instead by chemosynthesis, the conversion of chemicals into energy. Microbes cluster around vents, feeding on hydrogen sulfide, a substance toxic to most surface creatures. These microbes in turn form the base of a food web supporting giant tube worms, blind shrimp, and peculiar fish. In these vent communities, one witnesses the startling reality that life's foundation is not light, but adaptability. It is a glimpse into what life might resemble on distant planets or moons, where sunlight never touches the ground, yet chemical reactions whisper the possibility of survival. Europa, the icy moon of Jupiter with its hidden ocean beneath frozen crust, feels less distant when one has seen vents glowing in the abyss. But the deep is not a realm of abundance, it is a realm of endurance. Every calorie is precious, every encounter rare. The ocean floor is covered by a slow, constant snowfall of organic debris from the upper layers, known as marine snow. Each particle is a relic of life above, tiny skeletons of plankton, fragments of algae, fecal pellets drifting in silence. This snow nourishes the deep but only sparsely. Many organisms drift in near starvation, their metabolisms slowed to survive on almost nothing. Some wait months between meals, storing energy in oils or fats, while others seize whatever arrives, no matter how large or unexpected. This is why gulper eels swallow prey larger than themselves, and why scavengers will devour a whale's body for decades, reducing even bone to dust. The ocean's darkness is not empty, it is simply patient. For humans, entering this realm is less an act of discovery than of intrusion. Submersibles and remotely operated vehicles extend beams of artificial light into the abyss, and life responds with caution. Some creatures scatter, their fragile bodies vanishing into blackness. Others are drawn closer, confused by the glow. Yet every observation is distorted. A fish hauled up to the surface bursts apart, its body unable to withstand the change in pressure. A squid filmed in the beam of a camera appears strange and unnatural, its colours exaggerated by the light. What researchers see is never the deep sea as it truly is, but a version disrupted by intrusion. The truth remains cloaked just beyond the reach of technology. This tension between curiosity and limitation echoes in history. For centuries, humans imagined sea monsters lurking in the depths, leviathans large enough to sink ships, serpents winding for miles beneath the surface. Sailors returning from voyages carried tales of giant tentacles, of creatures with eyes like lanterns rising from the abyss. Today, with cameras and trawling nets, we know that colossal squid indeed roam the deep, their eyes the largest in the animal kingdom, designed to catch faint glimmers of light. What was myth became reality, but only partially. For every species confirmed, countless others remain hidden. Scientists estimate that millions of species still dwell undiscovered in the deep ocean, their existence inferred from fragments of DNA in the water, but never yet seen. And so, the deep does not simply conceal life, it conceals knowledge. Each expedition expands the borders of understanding, yet simultaneously enlarges the horizon of mystery. The discovery of deep-sea vents rewrote biology, but it also raised the question, what else survives beyond the reach of light? Genetic sampling reveals organisms with no known relatives, creatures that challenge the very branches of the tree of life. To explore the deep is to confront not only physical darkness but intellectual darkness, the boundaries of what science has yet to name. The struggle to explore these depths reflects something elemental about human ambition. Satellites have mapped distant galaxies, telescopes have reached across billions of years to witness the birth of stars. And yet, the ocean, covering most of Earth, remains largely uncharted. It is not simply a matter of scale or difficulty. It is a confrontation with limits, with the fact that some frontiers resist conquest. The ocean is not like space, where rockets escape gravity. It is an environment that surrounds and crushes, pressing inward with equal force from every direction. To descend is to invite annihilation, unless cloaked in steel and caution. But within this impossibility lies a lure. The more the deep resists, the more it seduces. Each image of a strange creature, each glimpse of a vent glowing with life, stirs questions too vast to silence. What if forms of intelligence exist here, hidden in patterns not yet recognized? What if chemical reactions near vents resemble the first sparks that gave rise to life itself? What if, in the trenches, there are still creatures that recall the primeval oceans of Earth's youth, survivors of extinctions that reshaped the surface world? These are not fantasies. They are possibilities rooted in evidence, in fragments collected from nets and cameras, in whispers encoded in DNA drifting through black water. Yet the ocean remains indifferent. It does not yield its secrets easily, nor does it care for human desire. For every expedition, there are dozens that fail, vehicles lost, machines crushed, budgets consumed. The darkness swallows ambition as effortlessly as it swallows light. Still, humanity persists, driven by the same hunger that led ships across the edge of maps and rockets beyond the atmosphere. The ocean is not just a space of science, but of meaning, a mirror reflecting the desire to understand what cannot yet be grasped. And so the descent continues, not only in steel vessels but in imagination. When night falls and waves churn, when the horizon vanishes into black, the ocean reminds the surface world of what lies beneath. Each crash of surf against a ship's hull is a whisper from the abyss, a reminder of the weight and silence below. The deep waits with patience older than civilizations, offering glimpses only to those willing to risk everything. But perhaps the true question is not whether humans can explore the deep, but whether they ever should. In a place where life endures by rules unknown to us, does intrusion change what it touches? Could observation itself alter ecosystems that have thrived in silence for millions of years? As the submersible's lights fade into darkness, this question rises with the vessel, lingering at the surface like mist above the waves. It invites a deeper reflection, not just on what the ocean hides, but on what it means for humans to insist on uncovering it. At the heart of the deep ocean lies a paradox. It is both the most alien environment on Earth and the one most intimately tied to our survival. The darkness of the abyss, though seemingly remote, has shaped climate, chemistry, and even the course of evolution on the surface. To understand why humanity can never truly explore the deep is to understand not only its physical barriers, but its immense role in the balance of the planet itself. What appears as silence and emptiness is in fact a great engine, circulating currents, storing carbon, and guarding life in ways still only dimly understood. Ocean currents, driven by the interplay of temperature and salinity, move like slow rivers beneath the surface. This thermohaline circulation pulls warm water from the tropics toward the poles and sinks it into the depths as it cools and becomes heavier. Once submerged, it may remain trapped in the abyss for centuries before rising again. In this way, the deep ocean acts as the Earth's memory, carrying heat and carbon dioxide across vast distances. The deep is not static, it is a conveyor belt of time itself. When volcanic eruptions or human industries release carbon into the air, much of it is eventually drawn down into the depths, where it is stored in a dark vault far from the sky. This storage slows climate change, though imperfectly. Without the deep ocean's silent service, the surface world would already be far hotter, less livable. But even this planetary engine is fragile. Small shifts in currents ripple across continents. During the last ice age, when glaciers advanced across much of the northern hemisphere, circulation slowed and deep waters trapped carbon more efficiently. The surface world cooled, ecosystems reshaped themselves, and species rose and fell. Today, as polar ice melts at an unprecedented pace, fresh water floods into the seas, disrupting salinity. Scientists warn that the circulation could stall again, not in ice but in heat. The result would not be a frozen world but a chaotic one, where weather patterns break, food systems collapse, and coastlines drown. The abyss, though invisible, holds the threads of the surface's fate. And yet, for all its power, the deep remains unknown. Sensors dropped into trenches have revealed creatures moving in the dark, but the scale of biomass, the true measure of life hidden below, remains an enigma. The largest migration on Earth occurs daily, when billions of fish and invertebrates rise at dusk from the deep scattering layer to feed near the surface, then sink again at dawn. This movement regulates the transfer of carbon, transferring it from surface waters into the abyss, but the sheer size of the migration is only now becoming clear. It is as if entire forests move invisibly each day, unseen by satellites and undetected by most instruments. Humanity depends on these migrations for climate stability without even realizing their existence. And yet, even when glimpsed, these creatures appear as ghosts. Many dissolve under the pressure change when captured, their bodies collapsing into shapeless jelly before scientists can study them. Others appear on sonar as indistinct blurs, signals lost in static. For every discovery, a dozen mysteries deepen. What proportion of the ocean's biomass exists in the mesopelagic zone? How much carbon do these nightly migrations truly carry? The answers remain veiled, not because humans lack questions, but because the ocean resists yielding answers. The resistance is not merely physical, but epistemic, a word from philosophy meaning a limit to knowledge itself. In the abyss, even when instruments succeed, they may distort. Lights used to film creatures alter their behavior, drawing or repelling them. Nets destroy fragile specimens before they can be examined. Even DNA fragments drifting in the water, collected and sequenced, reveal organisms never seen alive. These environmental DNA traces whisper a vast unknown diversity, yet they remain fragments of a puzzle with most of its pieces missing. The ocean does not simply hide, it filters what humans can know, offering only riddles in place of clarity. And still, humanity tries. Submersibles, built like armoured capsules, carry explorers into this midnight kingdom. Remote-operated vehicles extend steel limbs into the mud of the seafloor, collecting samples with clumsy precision. Autonomous drones roam unmoored, scanning ridges and canyons with sonar. Each mission produces maps, footage, and specimens that reshape understanding. But what they reveal is not completeness, it is incompleteness on a grander scale. To map 1% of the ocean is to see how vast the remaining 99% remains. The deeper humans look, the larger the mystery grows. Perhaps it is this tension that makes the abyss feel sacred. Ancient civilizations often imagine the sea as both womb and tomb, a place where life began and where all life eventually returns. Modern science confirms part of that vision. The first cells may indeed have emerged from hydrothermal vents, nurtured by heat and chemistry, in a darkness not unlike that of the present-day deep. And the ocean floor today is littered with the bones of whales, fish, and even entire species long extinct, their remains preserved in mud that holds a fossil record older than any stone on land. The deep ocean is not only alive, it is archival, a library where Earth's most ancient stories are written not in ink, but in sediments and skeletons. Yet archives can also be warnings. In certain layers of the seafloor, scientists find evidence of past cataclysms, sudden releases of methane, massive die-offs, ancient warming events where currents stalled and oceans suffocated. These records show that the deep is not a passive space but a player in planetary history, capable of shifting suddenly and catastrophically. To study it is not merely curiosity, it is an act of survival, a way of glimpsing the future through the memory of the Earth. But studying is not the same as mastering. The ocean grants glimpses of its past, but never promises mastery of its present. The irony is stark. Humanity depends on the abyss to stabilize climate, to nurture biodiversity, to store carbon, and preserve memory. Yet humanity cannot even map it fully, let alone control it. Ships crisscross the surface with satellites above them, and still the deep remains largely unknown. The abyss is less a frontier to be conquered than a mirror, reflecting back the limits of knowledge and the arrogance of ambition. And in that mirror lies a question as old as myth. What does it mean to be human in a world where so much remains unknowable? The ocean does not answer, it only deepens the question. Every descent leaves explorers with the sense that they have not solved a mystery but stepped deeper into it. The silence of the abyss is not emptiness but fullness, a fullness too vast to measure. When the submersible rises again and daylight breaks across the waves, the world feels changed, not because the deep has been conquered, but because it has been glimpsed. And that glimpse carries weight, a reminder that survival on the surface is tied to secrets hidden far below. As the wake of the vessel fades, so too does the illusion of control, leaving behind the awareness that the ocean, vast and indifferent, will continue its silent work with or without human understanding. And so, the journey does not end with knowledge, but with awe, and awe is the seed of further descent. Somewhere below, in trenches deeper than imagination, questions are waiting, patient as stone. To ask them is to accept that some answers may never come, and perhaps that is the truest lesson of the abyss. In the darkness of the abyss, where silence reigns and time stretches beyond imagination, The very idea of exploration begins to fracture. What humans call discovery in these depths is never complete, for each glimpse is partial, each encounter shaped by limits that no technology has yet overcome. The ocean's refusal to yield fully is not only physical, it is also ecological. Every organism encountered here is not simply a curiosity, but a clue to the complexity of systems that remain hidden in the folds of pressure and night. The more we learn about them, the more we realize that the abyss is not simply an uncharted wilderness, but an intricate web of life whose patterns extend far beyond human reach. Take, for example, the fragile ecosystems clustered around seamounts, those undersea mountains rising from the abyssal plains like drowned peaks. These formations, shaped by ancient volcanic activity, host corals that glow like pale chandeliers, their colonies spreading slowly across centuries. Unlike tropical corals, which depend on sunlight, these cold water corals thrive in absolute darkness, feeding on the slow drift of marine snow and the occasional upwelling of nutrients. They create labyrinths where fish, crustaceans, and soft-bodied creatures weave through branches older than entire civilizations. Some of these corals have been dated at more than 4,000 years old, their skeletons recording chemical changes in the water across ages. To disturb them is to erase millennia of history, an archive written in calcium and time. Around hydrothermal vents, another kind of oasis exists. These vents, spewing minerals and heat from the fractures of tectonic plates, sustain a level of biodiversity that challenges the very definition of an ecosystem. Tube worms without mouths or stomachs host symbiotic bacteria that transform toxic chemicals into nourishment. Blind shrimp crowd near the hottest waters, their bodies guided by sensors capable of detecting faint heat signatures. Some species here are found nowhere else on Earth, bound entirely to the vents that sustain them, and when those vents shift or collapse, as they inevitably do, entire communities vanish, extinguished in silence. The fragility of such ecosystems reveals a profound truth. The deep sea is not only a place of endurance, but also of ephemerality. Yet these same systems are also threatened by human ambition, for beneath the seafloor lie mineral riches that the surface world craves. Vast fields of polymetallic nodules, lumps of manganese, nickel, cobalt, and rare earth elements scatter across the abyssal plains. These nodules are formed over millions of years, each growing millimetre by millimetre around fragments of shell or rock like pearls of the abyss. To mining companies, they represent opportunity, the raw materials needed for batteries, electronics, and renewable technologies. But to the deep sea, they represent the foundation of entire habitats. Creatures cling to them, microbes coat them, fish feed among them. Removing these nodules is not simply resource extraction. It is the dismantling of ecosystems that took eons to emerge. The debate over deep-sea mining reveals the tension between progress and preservation. On one hand, humanity seeks the minerals necessary to move beyond fossil fuels, to create a cleaner future. On the other, the destruction of the deep may unleash consequences we cannot yet measure. Sediment plumes stirred by mining operations could drift for hundreds of miles, smothering delicate organisms that survive only in the thin margin between survival and collapse. Noise pollution, a concept unfamiliar to the surface world, could shatter the communication of species that rely on faint vibrations in the dark. Carbon stored in sediments could be released, undoing millennia of natural sequestration. Each act of disturbance, no matter how precise, would echo across systems too vast and too fragile to predict. Even without mining, human presence already intrudes. Plastics, discarded on the surface, sink slowly into the abyss, accumulating on the sea floor. In trenches thousands of meters deep, amphipods have been found with microplastics embedded in their guts. Mercury, released by industrial processes, concentrates in predators like deep-sea fish, whose long lifespans make them vulnerable to poisoning. The abyss, once imagined as pristine, is now revealed as a mirror of the surface world's excesses. Pollution does not vanish into the deep. It settles there, layered into the sediments, where it will remain for centuries. The ocean, vast as it is, has limits, and those limits are beginning to reveal themselves. Still, amid the fragility and intrusion, the deep retains its aura of resilience. In the wreckage of human presence, life adapts in unexpected ways. Sunken ships become reefs, their steel hulls colonized by sponges and corals. Plastic debris becomes shelter for creatures too small to be seen, turning garbage into habitat. Even oil seeps, leaking from cracks in the seafloor, support unique microbial communities that transform toxins into sustenance. The ocean bends, absorbs, reshapes, but it does not forget. The traces of our presence remain, etched into its chemistry, its sediments, its fragile inhabitants. And this leads to a deeper question. If we cannot fully explore the ocean without changing it, what does exploration truly mean? To see is to disturb, to capture is to destroy, to mine is to erase. Knowledge comes at a cost, and in the abyss that cost may be permanence. Scientists debate whether some places should remain untouched, sanctuaries beyond the reach of ships and machines. Perhaps mystery itself is worth preserving. Perhaps to leave parts of the ocean unexplored is to respect the balance that has endured longer than humanity has existed. But human curiosity resists boundaries. Each time a new species is discovered, each time a submersible films a creature glowing in the dark, the hunger for more grows stronger. The deep ocean stands as both a challenge and a temptation, a space where the promise of discovery collides with the inevitability of consequence. To descend is to confront not only the unknown, but also the responsibility that comes with it. The ocean does not yield lightly, and every revelation feels borrowed, a gift that cannot be taken for granted. As vessels rise back toward the surface, their lights fading from the trenches below, the deep reclaims its silence. Ecosystems continue in patience, untouched by the retreat of explorers. Corals extend their branches another fraction of a millimetre. Tube worms pulse with the chemistry of vents. Amphipods sift through marine snow, unaware of debates on the surface. Life here is indifferent to human ambition, yet it is also bound to it, for every choice above echoes below. The question grows more insistent with each descent. In seeking to explore the deep, are we searching for knowledge? Or are we unravelling a balance older than ourselves? The abyss does not answer, it only deepens the silence. And in that silence, one feels the weight of something larger than curiosity, larger even than survival. The awareness that to disturb the deep is to touch the very fabric of Earth's future. And so the journey continues, not in conquest, but in humility. The ocean waits, patient as stone, its mysteries intact, its silence unbroken. Yet on the horizon, ships gather, machines prepare, ambitions rise. The tension between awe and appetite grows sharper, and the next descent may reveal not only life, but loss. The waves above conceal both possibility and peril, and beneath them the abyss remains, waiting to be seen, or to remain unseen. To descend into the deep ocean is not only to confront darkness, but also to confront history. The seabed is more than a landscape of silt and stone. It is a vast archive, a record of Earth's transformations preserved in silence. Every layer of sediment holds traces of past worlds, microscopic shells of plankton that once floated near the surface, volcanic ash from ancient eruptions, dust carried by winds from vanished deserts. Pressed together over millions of years, these deposits form a narrative written in mineral and bone, a story of life and death far older than humanity. Scientists drill cores from the seafloor, pulling up cylinders of mud that span epochs. Within them are clues to ice ages, extinctions, and the rhythms of climate stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. The deep is not only alive, it is a time machine, preserving memories that land has long since erased. Among the most haunting records are those of mass extinctions. At certain depths, cores reveal sudden changes. A layer of clay enriched with iridium, a metal rare on Earth but common in asteroids. This is the fingerprint of the impact that ended the age of dinosaurs 66 million years ago, when a rock struck the Yucatan and sent shockwaves across the oceans. In the deep sea, that cataclysm is written not in fire but in silence. For thousands of years afterward, plankton nearly vanished, their absence leaving a gap in the fossil record as sharp as a scar. The ocean remembers even when continents forget. Another layer tells of the Permian extinction over 250 million years ago, when volcanic eruptions triggered an ocean starved of oxygen. The deep became a graveyard then, and the evidence remains locked in sediments that whisper of suffocation and collapse. But the abyss holds not only death, it also preserves beginnings. Fossilized microbes from deep-sea sediments suggest that life clung to the ocean floor even during times when the surface was nearly barren. Some scientists believe the deep was a refuge during cataclysms, a place where stability endured while the surface burned or froze. Hydrothermal vents, with their steady chemistry, may have sheltered early life forms that later repopulated the seas. The idea that the origin of life lies in such darkness is not simply speculation. It is a hypothesis supported by living analogues today. The bacteria thriving on sulfur and methane near vents resemble the earliest forms of the life, organisms that existed before oxygen, before plants, before the sun itself mattered to survival. To look into the deep is to look backward, perhaps to the cradle of existence. And yet, the deeper one looks, the more fragile these records appear. Human activity is now disturbing sediments that have remained untouched for millions of years. Bottom trawling, a fishing method that drags weighted nets across the seafloor, tears up not only living habitats but also ancient layers, erasing data that cannot be recovered. Mining proposals threaten to disturb sediments on scales that could alter geochemical cycles. Even climate change, by altering currents and oxygen levels, is beginning to rewrite the chemical archive of the abyss. The ocean's memory is long, but it is not indestructible. What humans destroy today may erase the possibility of knowing tomorrow. The paradox deepens. Humanity seeks the ocean's knowledge while simultaneously erasing it. Submersibles carry instruments to measure oxygen, carbon, and heat, but ships above leak oil, discard plastics, and release noise that penetrates into trenches. Microplastics, invisible yet persistent, now rain into the abyss like an artificial snow, embedding themselves in sediments alongside natural particles. Future cores will bear the record of this era, a layer of polymers, a signal of human presence written in fragments of bottles, bags, and fibers. Our age will be legible to the future not by monuments, but by waste, preserved in the ocean's library long after cities collapse. And still, for all that is lost, there are revelations yet to be found. Consider the zombie worms, formerly called Osidax, which feast on the bones of whales that fall to the seafloor. They bore into bone, releasing acid, and feed not on flesh but on the microbes within. Their existence was unknown until recently, hidden in the dark for millions of years, quietly shaping the recycling of matter. Or the bristle worms discovered around methane seeps, feeding in ways no surface biology had predicted. Each revelation reminds us that the deep is not a graveyard but a crucible, where the rules of survival are endlessly rewritten. This capacity for survival raises questions that extend beyond Earth. If life can exist without light, feeding on chemicals alone, then why not on other worlds? Jupiter's moon, Europa, Saturn's moon Enceladus, both harbour oceans beneath ice, warmed not by the sun but by tidal forces and geothermal heat. The creatures at our hydrothermal vents are in essence prototypes of what might exist there. In this sense, exploring Earth's deep sea is not only planetary science, but also cosmic anthropology, a way of rehearsing for encounters with alien biology. The abyss is our nearest model of the extraterrestrial, yet it is one we barely understand, a mystery beneath our own feet while we gaze toward the stars. And here lies another irony. We have mapped the surface of Mars in greater detail than our own seafloor. The craters of the Moon are charted with precision, yet the canyons of the mid-Atlantic ridge remain blurred. It is easier to escape Earth's gravity than to penetrate its watery skin. Rockets rise through thinning air into vacuum. Submersibles sink into a medium that grows denser, heavier, more crushing with each meter. Space may be vast, but it is empty. The ocean is vast and it resists. Perhaps this is why it feels more alien. It does not offer the clarity of stars but the confusion of shadows. The deep thus becomes a metaphor as much as a frontier. It is the unknown that lies not in distant galaxies, but here, intimate and hidden, shaping our lives while remaining unseen. The pressure that crushes steel is the same force that drives circulation, that stabilizes climate, that feeds ecosystems through cycles of carbon. To study it is not a luxury, it is a necessity. And yet necessity collides with impossibility. To know the deep fully is beyond reach, and perhaps always will be. As submersibles rise again, carrying cores of sediment and fragile specimens, the thought lingers that these fragments are both treasures and warnings. They remind us of extinctions past, of climates shifted, of life surviving against odds. They also remind us of our own power to disrupt, to inscribe a layer of damage that future beings, if they exist, will read as clearly as we read the iridium clay of the dinosaur's end. The abyss does not speak in words, but in strata, in shells, in the quiet layering of time. And so, as the ship rolls gently on the surface, the knowledge carried upward is bitter-sweet. Each sample is a revelation, yet each descent exposes how much remains untold. The ocean guards its archives with patience, and humans, no matter how persistent, remain outsiders. The dark is not empty, it is full of memory, and memory, once disturbed, cannot be restored. This recognition does not halt curiosity, but it tempers it with humility. The next descent will bring new glimpses, new questions, new temptations to probe deeper. But the abyss waits, silent and vast, knowing that human time is brief, while its own patience is infinite. And in that patience lies both mystery and warning, a reminder that exploration is not mastery, but participation in a story much larger than ourselves. There is a haunting truth that accompanies every attempt to descend into the deep. The ocean resists not only because of pressure, darkness, and scale, but because its very architecture is designed against intrusion. The trenches, ridges, and plains of the abyss are not passive landscapes. They are dynamic, shifting, and often violent. Beneath the calm surface lies a planet in constant motion, its tectonic plates grinding against each other, opening fissures that release molten rock, closing gaps with earthquakes that ripple through the water like invisible thunder. To explore the deep is not only to confront biological mystery, but to navigate a geology alive with upheaval. The mid-ocean ridges, stretching for tens of thousands of miles, are the longest mountain chains on Earth, though almost entirely hidden beneath the sea. Here, the Earth continually remakes itself as magma seeps upward, hardens, and pushes old crust aside. Black smokers, chimneys that spew superheated water rich with minerals, dot the ridges, creating both danger and opportunity. They host alien-like ecosystems, but they also shape the chemistry of oceans at a planetary scale. A submersible approaching one of these vents risks being engulfed by temperatures exceeding 400 degrees Celsius, a furnace in the middle of a near-freezing desert. The line between survival and annihilation is thin, marked only by currents and chance. Then there are the trenches, wounds in the Earth's crust where one tectonic plate dives beneath another. The Mariana Trench, the Kermadec Trench, the Java Trench, each plunges deeper than the tallest mountains rise, their slopes steeper than the Grand Canyon. These places are shaped not by stillness, but by collision, zones of relentless compression, where rock bends, buckles, and sinks into the mantle. Earthquakes rumble here with devastating force, their waves travelling through the ocean to strike coastlines thousands of miles away as tsunamis. To send instruments into these trenches is to risk them vanishing forever, swallowed not by creatures but by geology itself. Yet within these violent spaces, life persists. At the bottom of trenches, amphipods scavenge in darkness, their bodies adapted to withstand pressures so immense that water itself behaves differently, compressing into forms unimagined at the surface. Microbes survive within sediments, feeding on the faintest traces of organic matter. Some even metabolize methane or hydrogen, hinting at metabolisms that might echo the earliest life on Earth. These creatures are not passive relics, they are pioneers, existing at the very limits of possibility. Their endurance reframes what habitable means, extending the boundaries far beyond what was once believed. The abyssal plains, by contrast, seem deceptively calm. Stretching for thousands of miles, they are the flattest regions of Earth, covered by a slow rain of particles. To the untrained eye, they appear empty, but in reality they are deserts alive with hidden movement. Starfish creep across the mud, brittle as porcelain, yet persistent. Sea cucumbers, bizarre and alien, drift in silence, consuming detritus and recycling nutrients. Fishes with gelatinous bodies lie half buried, waiting for shadows to pass overhead. It is a world where energy is scarce, and survival is a strategy of patience. Unlike forests or reefs, where life is crowded and frantic, the abyssal plain is sparse, contemplative, and eternal. And yet, even these plains are not static. Sediments shift with currents, burying and revealing fossils, carrying nutrients to unseen destinations. Landslides occasionally cascade from the continental shelves, avalanches of mud travelling at breathtaking speeds, reshaping the seafloor in an instant. These events can sever undersea cables, alter habitats, and destroy decades of slow growth. To an explorer, such landscapes are treacherous, not because they seem hostile, but because their dangers are silent until the moment they unfold. What emerges from these geological realities is the recognition that the ocean is not merely a container for life. It is a living system itself, its floor as dynamic as its surface. To explore it fully would mean understanding not only the creatures that drift in the water, but the shifting crust beneath. And that crust is not easily known. Instruments buried in sediments record vibrations and chemical changes, but the abyss guards its secrets with depth and distance. Even earthquakes, which release energy across vast scales, are often poorly understood, their signals distorted by the water that carries them. The deep is not only dark but noisy, filled with the low-frequency groans of the earth itself. For humans, this adds another dimension to the impossibility of exploration. It is not enough to build vessels that resist pressure. They must also survive in a landscape that moves unpredictably. Submersibles may be crushed not by the water alone, but by landslides or eruptions. Remote vehicles tethered to ships above may become ensnared in fissures or trapped in shifting sediments. The ocean is a labyrinth with walls that shift without warning. Exploration here is as much gamble as science, each descent an act of faith in machinery and luck. And yet, there is beauty in this volatility. The very forces that threaten exploration also sustain the ocean's mysteries. Hydrothermal vents, born of tectonic collisions, give rise to ecosystems that defy expectation. Trenches, carved by subduction, host organisms adapted to extremes. Abyssal plains, sculpted by sediment and landslides, record the memory of ages. Destruction and creation, violence and life are inseparable here. The ocean is not an inert abyss. It is a stage where geology and biology perform together, shaping one another in silence. This interconnection mirrors a larger truth, that the boundaries between Earth's systems are illusions. The deep ocean is not separate from the atmosphere, the continents, or even humanity. When tectonic plates shift, they send ripples that shape coastlines. When vents release minerals, they alter ocean chemistry, which in turn influences climate. And when the deep stores carbon, it shapes the balance of life on the surface. To imagine the abyss as distant is to forget that every breath of air on land is linked to processes unfolding in darkness below. It is this realization that haunts explorers as they ascend back to the surface. The ocean is not only unknowable, it is indispensable. Its trenches, ridges and plains may seem remote, but they hold the levers of planetary stability. To disturb them is to disturb the Earth itself. The temptation to mine, to exploit, to harness what lies beneath is not only a risk to ecosystems, but to the balance of climates, to the very survival of humanity. And yet the lure remains, as vast as the abyss it springs from. So the question becomes sharper. Can humanity resist the urge to treat the deep as merely resource, as quarry? Or will the ocean floor, with its minerals and energy, become the next frontier of exploitation? The abyss does not answer, but its silence feels heavy, as if waiting. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not what lies below, but what choices humanity will make above. The waves close again, erasing the wake of the vessel, but the weight of these questions remains. In the dark, tectonic plates continue their collision, vents continue to glow, trenches continue to swallow. The ocean endures in its indifference. And as the ship drifts under starlight, one cannot help but wonder what lies in the next fold of the abyss, hidden just beyond the reach of light and certainty. The deep sea is often imagined as a place of isolation, a void far removed from the familiar rhythms of life above. Yet to think of it as disconnected would be a mistake. The abyss is woven into the cycles of the planet in ways that are subtle, invisible, and relentless. It is not only a vault of memory and a crucible of geology, but also a vast engine of exchange, where matter and energy move in patterns that shape everything from weather to the very air we breathe. To enter its darkness is to see not only mystery but also connection, threads binding the fate of the ocean to the fate of humanity. One of the most remarkable of these threads is the cycle of carbon. On the surface, plankton bloom in sunlight, absorbing carbon dioxide and weaving it into their fragile bodies. When they die, they drift downward, their remains joining the endless snowfall of marine snow. Most of this organic rain is consumed in the midwater by fish and invertebrates fueling daily migrations. But some particles escape, sinking deeper and deeper until they reach the sea floor. There, they are buried, compressed into sediments, and locked away for thousands of years. This biological pump is the ocean's way of regulating climate, sequestering carbon in silence. It is invisible, continuous, and irreplaceable. Without it, Earth's atmosphere would thicken with greenhouse gases, and the balance of life on the surface would tilt toward chaos. Yet the very creatures that perform this work remain among the least understood on the planet. Lanternfish, perhaps the most abundant vertebrates on Earth, rise at night to feed on plankton and retreat by day into darkness, their bodies glinting with organs of light. In doing so, they transfer carbon from surface waters into the deep, playing a role in climate regulation far beyond their fragile size. But how many lanternfish exist? How much carbon do they carry? The answers remain uncertain. Nets capture only fragments of their vast migrations, and sonar detects only shifting clouds. The deep, once again, hides its own importance. Another connection lies in oxygen. Surface winds stir the upper ocean, drawing oxygen into its waters, but in the abyss renewal is slow. Life there survives on faint traces carried downward by circulation. When that circulation falters, oxygen can vanish, leaving dead zones where little can endure. Past epochs preserved in sediments tell of times when deep waters suffocated, driving mass extinctions. Today, as the surface warms and currents shift, oxygen levels in the deep are falling once again. It is a change invisible to most, yet profound, for every breath taken on land is ultimately linked to the health of the seas. The abyss may feel distant, but it is in truth the unseen partner of the atmosphere, breathing with us in rhythms longer than civilizations. Perhaps the most astonishing link is found in the way the ocean governs climate itself. The circulation of heat and salt, the storage of carbon, the rhythm of oxygen, all combine to stabilize Earth's surface. Without the abyss, storms would rage differently, seasons would shift, coastlines would transform, and yet, even as this stability persists, it is fragile. Satellite data show currents slowing, heat sinking deeper into the ocean, patterns altering in ways both subtle and alarming. The deep is changing, though it changes in silence. The surface feels it only in echoes, in storms that linger longer, in droughts that spread wider, in winters that falter. The abyss speaks not in words but in weather. And still, amid these planetary functions, the deep holds its own mysteries of life. The creatures that drift and crawl here are not merely curiosities, they are architects of cycles. Consider the giant squid, once thought mythical, now confirmed as a rare inhabitant of the dark. Its very existence suggests food chains of staggering scale, for a creature so massive must feed on abundance, and its predators, the sperm whales, must be sustained by even greater depths of prey. Or consider the microscopic foraminifera, tiny shells of calcium that fall in endless numbers, forming layers of sediment thicker than mountains. Each shell represents a breath of carbon taken from the air, each layer a record of climate long past. These creatures, large and small, together weave the web that binds surface to deep human breath to abyssal silence. Yet human activity strains this web. Overfishing has begun to deplete species once thought inexhaustible, including lanternfish, targeted for their oils and proteins. Carbon emissions push more greenhouse gases into the sea, altering chemistry, raising acidity, dissolving the shells of plankton that form the foundation of the biological pump. Plastics and toxins descend invisibly, carried by currents, entering the guts of deep-sea creatures and embedding themselves in sediments. Each act of surface consumption becomes an echo in the abyss, recorded in bodies, in mud, in silence. The irony is sharp. The deep ocean, which sustains life on Earth, is being reshaped by the very species that relies on it most. And yet humanity has seen only fragments of its vastness. To alter what we cannot even fully map is to gamble with forces beyond comprehension. It is as if one were to edit a book in a language never learned, erasing lines without knowing the meaning of the story. The deep resists, but resistance has limits. Its silence is not immunity, it is endurance, and endurance can be broken. Still, there is a lesson in the resilience that persists. Ecosystems that seem fragile also adapt in ways that astonish. When a whale falls to the seafloor, its carcass nourishes life for decades, turning death into a cathedral of survival. When vents collapse, new ones open, and life colonizes them again in a matter of years. When landslides bury habitats, others emerge in the altered terrain. The abyss teaches that life bends, transforms, survives in the face of forces unimaginable. Perhaps it is not fragility alone that defines the deep, but resilience written in unfamiliar forms, and yet resilience does not mean invulnerability. The cycles of carbon, oxygen, and heat are balanced on threads delicate enough to unravel. The patience of the abyss cannot erase the speed of human change. To explore the deep, then, is not simply to ask what lives there, but to ask how our lives are bound to its hidden rhythms. The lanternfish flickering in darkness, the plankton drifting in sunlit waters, the sediments layering on the plains, they are not separate from us. They are us, transformed, recycled, carried through time in ways invisible but essential. As the ship rises and the horizon spreads in light, the awareness settles heavily. The abyss is not merely a frontier of mystery, but the foundation of survival. Its cycles are our cycles, its silence our breath, its endurance our inheritance. To ignore this is to mistake distance for irrelevance, to believe that what lies hidden cannot touch us. Yet it already does, in every gust of wind, in every drop of rain, in every lungful of air. And so, the next descent is not only about curiosity but responsibility. To glimpse the abyss is to glimpse the scaffolding of the world we inhabit, a scaffolding fragile and irreplaceable. The question is no longer just what secrets it holds, but whether humanity can learn to live with those secrets intact. The ocean closes again, its surface calm, its depth silent, its mysteries vast. And as the vessel drifts beneath the stars, another thought takes hold. If the abyss is a mirror of Earth's hidden order, what does it reflect about our future, and how long before the silence begins to speak louder than we can bear? Every descent into the deep is accompanied by the hum of machinery, the hiss of oxygen, and the quiet reminder that the explorers within their steel shell are guests in a world that does not welcome them. The further down they go, the more the deep becomes less a place and more a sensation, the pressure building, the light retreating, the silence thickening. And yet, even as instruments strain against their limits, the greatest challenge may not be mechanical but psychological. For the abyss is not only a frontier of physics and biology, it is a frontier of the human mind. Inside a submersible, space is suffocatingly small. Walls press close, lit by dim panels. The viewports are narrow, offering only a circle of visibility framed by black. Hours stretch into days when missions are long, with nothing but darkness outside. Some explorers describe it as awe-inspiring, others as deeply unsettling. The absence of reference points creates a disorientation the human brain is unprepared for. On land, even in the darkest cave, some sense of orientation exists. The pull of gravity, the feel of stone, the echo of sound. In the deep sea there is only suspension, a floating in endless blackness that blurs the boundary between body and void. This psychological weight is profound. Studies have shown that even trained divers, when exposed to prolonged darkness and confinement, experience shifts in perception. Time dilates, sounds seem louder, silence feels alive. Some report hallucinations, flashes of light, imagined movements in the corner of vision. The brain, deprived of stimuli, begins to invent its own. In the abyss, where bioluminescent sparks occasionally flare, reality and illusion mingle until one cannot be certain where perception ends and imagination begins. It is here, perhaps, that the myths of sea monsters were born, not solely from sightings of real creatures, but from the mind straining against the pressure of the unknown. Isolation compounds this effect. In the deep, communication with the surface is often delayed, distorted, or lost altogether. A submersible crew may drift miles below, entirely cut off, reliant only on their own wits and the integrity of their machine. The knowledge that no rescue is possible if the hull fails adds another layer of unease. Fear lingers in silence, amplified by each groan of metal, each flicker of a light. The abyss does not need to threaten. The human mind supplies its own terrors, yet awe persists alongside fear. Explorers often describe a contradictory sense of intimacy when gazing into the void, as though touching something both alien and familiar. The darkness becomes a canvas for reflection, a mirror of human fragility. To stare into it is to confront mortality, but also wonder. Perhaps that is why so many who descend return not discouraged but transformed, their sense of scale forever altered. The abyss does not diminish humanity. It situates it within a grandeur too vast to conquer. This psychological dimension is mirrored in culture. Throughout history, the sea has been a metaphor for the unconscious, for the depths of the mind that remain hidden from light. The Greeks imagined Oceanus, a boundless river encircling the world, while Norse myth spoke of Jörmungandr, the serpent coiled beneath the sea, holding the world together. In literature, the sea often symbolizes what cannot be fully known, an endless expanse of secrets and fears. To journey into the deep is to enact these myths in reality, to live inside the metaphor. The abyss becomes both external and internal, both ocean and psyche. And this connection shapes how humanity views exploration itself. Space travel is often celebrated as heroic, a journey upward into clarity and light. Ocean exploration, by contrast, carries a different symbolism, a descent, a confrontation with darkness, a willingness to face what is hidden. It is less triumphal, more contemplative, less conquest than surrender. This difference explains why the ocean often inspires fear even in those who never set foot on a ship. The thought of being suspended above thousands of meters of water, with nothing but darkness below, stirs a primal unease. It is not simply fear of drowning, it is fear of the unseen, of what lies beyond vision. But fear has its uses. It sharpens curiosity, drives invention, compels questions that would otherwise remain unasked. The very terror of the abyss becomes its allure. To send a vessel into the deep is to dramatize humanity's relationship with the unknown, to test whether curiosity can outlast dread. And each mission, whether it returns with footage of glowing creatures or only silence, affirms that the attempt itself matters. Exploration is not merely about answers, it is about the willingness to ask questions in the face of fear. Still, there are limits. Prolonged exposure to the psychological strain of the deep is not sustainable. Crews rotate, missions end, vessels return. Unlike space, where astronauts may live in orbit for months, the abyss allows only brief visits. Perhaps this is why the deep feels even more unattainable than the stars. It is not that humans cannot reach it, it is that they cannot stay. The ocean is not a realm to be inhabited, only touched. Its mysteries remain intact not because of distance, but because of duration. The abyss does not permit permanence, and yet, in fleeting encounters, it shapes imagination profoundly. The first grainy images of the Titanic resting on the seafloor ignited a global fascination, not because the ship was found, but because of where it lay, in the cold, silent depths, preserved like a ghost. The very act of seeing it touched something universal. The recognition that the ocean holds not only biology and geology, but memory, shipwrecks, lost cities, ancient relics, all lie hidden, preserved in darkness. The abyss is a cemetery as well as a cradle, a keeper of both life and history. This dual role intensifies the psychological pull. To descend is to confront not only alien creatures, but also echoes of human endeavour, vessels swallowed, explorers lost, ambitions drowned. The ocean returns fragments, rusted steel, scattered cargo, bones of ships, but never the whole. It reminds humanity of its vulnerability, of how quickly triumph can vanish into silence. Each wreck becomes a story not of conquest, but of humility, a reminder that the ocean does not yield to pride. And perhaps this is the truest lesson of the deep, that exploration is not about mastery but about relationship. The abyss does not need to be conquered to matter. Its power lies in its resistance, its refusal to be wholly known. In this way, it teaches something profound about the limits of human ambition. Knowledge has edges, curiosity has costs, and survival has boundaries. To descend into the deep is to touch those edges, to feel those costs, to acknowledge those boundaries. As the submersible rises again, breaking the surface into daylight, The psychological weight lifts, but not entirely. The silence of the abyss lingers in memory, a shadow that alters perception. The sea is no longer just water. It is depth, darkness, history, and possibility. And for those who have looked into it, even for a moment, the surface world will never feel the same. The waves close again, calm and bright, concealing the blackness beneath. Yet the mind carries it upward, haunted and inspired. The abyss waits, patient and indifferent, its silence pressing not only on steel, but on thought itself. And in that silence lies the next question, unspoken but insistent. What happens to a species that longs to explore what it cannot endure? The ocean's darkness does not merely resist exploration, it alters the very way science must be practiced. Unlike land or sky, where instruments can be tested and observations repeated under stable conditions, the abyss defies permanence. Each mission is brief, each experiment fragile, each glimpse unique. To study the deep is to accept uncertainty, to work with fragments, to build entire theories from seconds of footage or from a handful of samples hauled up through crushing pressure. The abyss does not allow laboratories. It forces laboratories to adapt to it. When scientists send remotely operated vehicles into the depths, they know that their cameras illuminate only the radius of a small room, while an infinite wilderness surrounds them unseen. What lies just beyond the beam may remain forever invisible. Nets dropped from ships often destroy the very creatures they seek to collect, turning delicate, gelatinous animals into shapeless masses before they can be examined. And submersibles, though marvels of engineering, can stay below only for a few hours, carrying their human occupants in cramped capsules where every flicker of light or sound is filtered through machinery. The deep is glimpsed, never lived in, never sustained. This limitation means that knowledge of the abyss often comes in fragments that resemble riddles more than answers. A strange fish rises from the depths, its body distorted by decompression, and scientists must guess what it looked like alive. A camera captures a fleeting flash in the dark, a silhouette that vanishes before identification, leaving only questions. Even when DNA traces are collected from seawater, they reveal the presence of organisms never seen, invisible species known only through genetic whispers. It is a science of shadows, where certainty is always provisional, and yet the abyss yields revelations profound enough to reshape understanding of life itself. The discovery of chemosynthetic ecosystems at hydrothermal vents in the 1970s overturned the long-held belief that sunlight was essential for all life. Here, in pitch-black depths, microbes thrived by consuming hydrogen sulfide and methane, substances toxic to most known organisms. From these microbes, entire food webs unfolded. Giant tube worms without mouths or stomachs, crabs with eyes that could detect faint heat, clams packed with symbiotic bacteria. It was not simply a new ecosystem. It was a new vision of life's possibilities. The deep sea became a model for how life might exist elsewhere in the cosmos, in oceans beneath the ice of distant moons or in the buried aquifers of Mars. Other discoveries echo this sense of revelation. In the cold, dark plains of the abyss, sponges have been found that may live for thousands of years, their slow growth and patience defying human measures of time. Some corals on seamounts are older than recorded history, recording chemical shifts in their skeletons as they grow, becoming living archives of climate. Deep-sea sharks like the Greenland shark glide through darkness with lifespans of 4 centuries, their bodies carrying scars of survival across ages. These organisms remind humanity that endurance takes many forms, and that time in the abyss moves at a scale alien to surface life. But each discovery carries a mirror of limitation. If a creature survives for centuries, how many lifetimes of research will it take to understand it? If a coral grows millimetre by millimetre over thousands of years, How easily can a trawling net destroy what cannot be restored? The abyss does not allow repetition. Once disturbed, its patience cannot be rewound. Knowledge gained comes with the risk of knowledge lost, and often the losses outpace the gains. This fragility is amplified by the urgency of human ambition. The deep contains not only life but resources, minerals essential for technology, genetic codes that may inspire medicine, energy sources locked in methane hydrates. To corporations and governments, the abyss appears less as mystery than as opportunity. Mining machines are designed to harvest polymetallic nodules from the sea floor, their steel claws scraping across plains that have been undisturbed for millions of years. Biotechnologists look to microbes in vents for enzymes that can survive extreme heat, potential tools for industry and health. Each descent into the abyss becomes not only scientific but economic, shadowed by the question of exploitation. The risk is profound. A single mining operation could erase habitats that took millennia to form, scattering sediment that drifts across ecosystems like a suffocating cloud. The removal of nodules may destroy anchor points for countless organisms, unraveling food webs before they are even understood. And the extraction of genetic material raises questions of ownership. Who claims the rights to life forms that evolved in darkness beyond borders? The abyss has no nations, yet its secrets are increasingly treated as commodities. The deep is becoming a frontier not only of exploration but of competition, where mystery collides with market. Still, amid these tensions, the abyss continues its silent work. Currents carry heat, regulate climate, bury carbon in sediments. Migrating creatures rise and fall, transferring energy between surface and depth. Earthquakes rumble unseen, vents collapse and reform, trenches shift as plates grind. The ocean is not waiting for humanity to explore it. It continues regardless, shaping the surface world in ways mostly unnoticed. The deep does not need us, but we need it. Without its hidden cycles, the surface would unravel, and perhaps that is why the abyss exerts such fascination. It is not merely what it hides that captivates, but the realization that our lives are entangled with it. To stare into the dark is to see not emptiness, but interconnection. Every breath of oxygen, every stable season, every grain of soil on land is touched by processes unfolding in silence miles below. The abyss is not absence, it is foundation, yet the foundation remains inaccessible. To map it fully would require centuries of effort and technologies not yet imagined. To inhabit it permanently may be impossible, for the physics themselves deny it. The abyss will not yield in the way mountains yield to climbing, or skies yield to flight. Its resistance is absolute, and that resistance defines it. The deep can be touched, sampled, glimpsed, but never possessed. This truth lingers as explorers ascend. The vessel breaks the surface, light floods the cabin, and the pressure eases. The crew carries samples, images, fragments of knowledge. Yet what stays with them most is not what was seen, but what was unseen. The vastness that remained untouched, the sense of being surrounded by more mystery than discovery. To explore the deep is always to return with more questions than answers, to realize that the darkness is not diminished but deepened by contact. As the ship turns toward shore, the sea stretches outward, glittering under the sun, but beneath that glitter, silence reigns. Creatures drift unseen, vents roar unheard, sediments settle undisturbed. The abyss waits, patient as ever, offering glimpses only when asked, and even then only partially. Its mystery is not a barrier to be broken, but a condition to be accepted. And as the horizon swallows the setting sun, another thought emerges. Perhaps the value of the abyss is not in what it can give, but in what it withholds. Its darkness forces humility. Its silence reminds humanity of limits. its resistance preserves balance. In that way, the ocean is not merely an obstacle to exploration, but a teacher, one whose lessons are written not in words, but in pressure, shadow, and time. The question then becomes not how much more we can take from the deep, but how much longer we can learn from it before it is altered beyond recognition. The silence of the abyss holds both wonder and warning, and to descend again is to enter a dialogue older than language. The ocean answers not with clarity, but with endurance, and in its endurance lies the challenge. Can humanity learn to endure alongside it, without unravelling what has endured for millions of years? The mystery of the deep ocean lies not only in its darkness, but in its silence, a silence that is not absence, but sound beyond human perception. For though the abyss appears mute, it is filled with voices, a vast chorus of clicks, rumbles, moans, and pulses that travel for hundreds of miles. To descend into the deep is to enter an acoustic world where communication replaces vision, where sound is the language of survival. In this hidden realm, silence is relative, and the ocean is never truly still. Whales are perhaps the most famous musicians of this underwater symphony. The songs of humpback whales, long and haunting, ripple through the water for hours, their patterns evolving season after season like verses in an unfinished poem. Blue whales, the largest creatures to have ever lived, produce calls so deep that human ears cannot detect them, infrasonic notes that carry across entire ocean basins. These songs are not simply cries of existence. They are tools of navigation, of courtship, of kinship across distances that dwarf terrestrial landscapes. To hear them is to understand that the ocean is stitched together by sound. But whales are only part of the chorus. Shrimp snap their claws with explosive speed, producing crackles that fill coastal waters with a constant static. Fish croak, grunt, and hum, their bodies vibrating with resonant chambers. Even the smallest creatures contribute. Plankton release faint noises as they move, each click a note in the invisible score. Together they create a soundscape so dense that scientists call it the biophony of the sea, a living symphony layered over the geophony of earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and waves striking the seafloor. For the inhabitants of the deep, this soundscape is not background, it is life. In a world without light, hearing becomes the primary sense. Some fish can detect frequencies so faint they are drowned out by the hum of ship engines. Others emit their own signals, pulses that echo through darkness to locate prey or mates. Squid, though silent themselves, can sense the vibrations of predators approaching from meters away. And whales, with their infrasonic voices, map the ocean not by sight, but by resonance, their songs bouncing off seamounts and trenches, creating an acoustic cartography of the abyss. Yet this ancient soundscape is changing. Human activity has filled the ocean with noise, the roar of ship engines, the thud of oil drills, the blasts of seismic surveys searching for fuel. These sounds, far louder than the natural chorus, travel vast distances, drowning out the voices of creatures that depend on them. Whales lose contact with their kin, fish scatter in confusion, migrations falter. In some places, noise levels have doubled each decade, transforming silence into cacophony. For the deep, this is not merely disturbance, it is erasure. To remove sound from the communication of creatures is to unravel the fabric of their survival. This intrusion raises profound questions. What happens when a blue whale's call, once able to travel across oceans, is muffled by shipping lanes? What happens when the crackle of shrimp is masked by drills, or when fish can no longer hear the vibrations of spawning mates? The abyss may resist physical conquest, but it is vulnerable to sound, for sound respects no boundary. It seeps into trenches, echoes across plains, penetrates where light and machines cannot. Humanity, without descending, has already altered the deep. But sound also offers a key to understanding. Because light cannot penetrate, scientists use acoustics to map and monitor the abyss. Sonar, both active and passive, has revealed mountain ranges, schools of fish, and migrating layers of life invisible to the eye. The deep scattering layer, once mistaken for the seafloor by early sonar operators, turned out to be billions of organisms moving daily in the largest migration on Earth. Acoustic tags attached to whales and sharks allow their movements to be tracked across vast distances, painting portraits of lives once hidden. Even earthquakes, volcanoes, and landslides leave their signatures in sound, allowing researchers to hear the pulse of the planet beneath the sea. These methods, however, come with paradox. To map the ocean with sonar is to add noise to an already noisy world. The very tools of knowledge contribute to disruption, complicating the balance between curiosity and preservation. Some sonar frequencies have been linked to the stranding of whales. Disoriented by signals that overwhelm their senses, the pursuit of understanding thus carries the risk of harm, a reminder that in the abyss, every intrusion has consequence. Still, the deep ocean soundscape remains a source of awe. Hydrothermal vents crackle as superheated water mixes with the cold, creating sonic signatures as distinct as fingerprints. Icebergs carving at the poles release thunder that resonates for miles, a reminder that even distant climates reach into the abyss. And the faint drumming of fish schools can be so synchronized that they resemble instruments, waves of rhythm echoing across the dark. To listen to the ocean is to realize it is never silent, that beneath the calm of the surface lies a world alive with resonance. Perhaps this is why recordings from the deep move people so profoundly. When played on the surface, whale songs and deep ocean rumbles feel like transmissions from another world. They remind us that the abyss is not empty but inhabited, not mute but eloquent. They bridge the distance between species, allowing human ears to hear, if only faintly, the conversations of the deep. And in that recognition lies humility, the realization that life has been singing in darkness long before humanity learned to listen. But these songs may not last. If noise pollution continues unchecked, if ecosystems unravel under climate change, if species vanish before being understood, then the chorus of the deep may fade into silence. The ocean will endure, but its voices may diminish, leaving behind a quieter, emptier world. The loss would not be ours alone. It would be a loss of Earth's own music, a symphony written over eons, silenced in a single century. And yet, for now, the songs persist. Whales still call, shrimp still crackle, fish still drum. In the midst of noise, resilience survives, though strained. Scientists deploy hydrophones across oceans, listening in real time to voices that cross basins, creating archives of sound that may one day outlast the species themselves. These recordings become not just data, but elegies, reminders that to listen is itself a form of reverence. As the submersible rises once more, breaking into the daylight, the memory of sound lingers as vividly as the sight of strange creatures. The abyss is not only dark, but resonant, not only silent, but filled with voices we are only beginning to hear. And in those voices lies both wonder and warning, an invitation to listen before it is too late. The waves close again, carrying vibrations unseen, and the ship drifts forward. Somewhere below, a blue whale sings a note deeper than mountains, carrying across oceans, threading through darkness. It is both song and question, a voice that asks without words. Will the chorus of the deep endure, or will it fall silent beneath the weight of human noise? The abyss has always been described as alien, and perhaps no comparison is more fitting. For the further we descend into its folds, the more the deep resembles not the earth we know, but the worlds we imagine beyond it. Its crushing pressure, its absence of light, its strange chemistries and its creatures that glow in defiance of darkness, all echo the conditions scientists speculate might exist on distant moons and planets. The deep ocean, though it lies beneath our feet, may be the closest mirror of the cosmos humanity will ever touch. Consider Europa, the icy moon of Jupiter. Beneath its frozen crust, hundreds of kilometers thick, lies an ocean larger than all the seas on Earth combined. Locked in darkness, warmed only by tidal forces from Jupiter's pull, it may host environments not unlike our hydrothermal vents. If microbes thrive on sulfur and methane here on Earth, why not there? Enceladus, a smaller moon of Saturn, sprays plumes of water vapor into space, carrying hints of organic molecules, a sign that chemistry akin to life simmers in its hidden depths. To imagine these places is to imagine Earth's deep ocean, where life survives without the sun, where energy springs from the planet's own heart. In this sense, every descent into the abyss is not only an exploration of Earth, but a rehearsal for the universe. The strange fish with light organs dangling from their foreheads, the shrimp clustered around boiling vents, the microbes feeding on chemical gradients. These are prototypes of what alien life might be. They are answers, written in flesh, to questions about habitability far beyond our skies. The abyss, in its resistance and resilience, reminds us that life does not require familiarity. It requires only possibility. And yet, this mirror cuts both ways. For if the abyss reflects the cosmos, it also reflects our ignorance. Even here, on our own planet, we cannot say how many species live in the deep, how ecosystems endure, how cycles interlock. We cannot explain how some organisms survive pressures that would crush steel, or how others live for thousands of years in near stasis. If we cannot comprehend the oceans that sustain us, how can we claim readiness to understand what lies beyond Earth? The abyss humbles ambition, reminding us that exploration is not mastery but mystery extended. Still, it is in human nature to look outward. Space agencies imagine missions to Europa, sending probes to pierce its ice, to swim in its buried sea. Engineers design submarines that might one day crawl across alien ocean floors. And yet, beneath the waves of our own planet, technologies falter. Our deepest dives remain rare, fleeting, fragile. We can launch spacecraft across billions of miles, but cannot sustain permanent presence a few miles beneath the ocean's skin. This irony sharpens the abyss's hold on imagination. The alien is not only out there, it is here, hidden in the very world we inhabit. This recognition reshapes how we think of Earth itself. The deep ocean becomes not only a frontier but a cosmos contained within, a universe of pressure and darkness parallel to the stars. The creatures that live there are not simply strange but cosmological, embodiments of what life could be elsewhere. When a jellyfish pulses with light in the abyss, it echoes the same defiance we imagine in alien seas, the refusal of darkness to erase life. The abyss is both mirror and model, reminding us that the boundaries between Earth and universe are porous, that to study one is to understand the other. But this comparison also deepens the stakes. For just as we worry about contaminating other worlds with our machines, we must consider what our presence does to the abyss. Space treaties forbid the careless scattering of microbes on Europa, yet we trawl nets across fragile seafloors without hesitation. We imagine protecting alien oceans from contamination, while failing to preserve the one ocean we already know holds life. The irony is sharp. In dreaming of other worlds, we neglect the alien world beneath our own. This neglect is not simply scientific but philosophical. The abyss forces us to confront what it means to seek knowledge. Do we explore to conquer or to participate? Do we demand clarity or accept mystery? When we imagine other planets, we often dream of colonization, of extraction, of expansion. The abyss suggests another path: endurance without conquest, survival through adaptation, patience beyond ambition. The creatures of the deep do not dominate their environment. They become it, shaping themselves to its extremes. Perhaps this is the truer lesson of alien life. Not how to reach it, but how to endure alongside it. There is also a mythic quality to these comparisons. Ancient cultures often imagine the sea as infinite, a boundary between the known and the unknown. In some traditions, the ocean was chaos itself, the unshaped matter from which creation emerged. Today, when we peer into its depths, we see echoes of that mythology in scientific form. The abyss, like chaos, resists definition. It offers both destruction and creation, both silence and song, both fragility and resilience. It is at once beginning and ending, echoing the cosmos itself. For explorers, this awareness changes the very nature of descent. To sink into the abyss is not only to study a habitat, but to enter a metaphor. The vessel becomes a spacecraft. The darkness becomes outer space. The creatures become emissaries of possibility. The psychological disorientation of the deep, where reference points vanish, where light is absent, where silence dominates, is indistinguishable from the conditions we imagine in alien exploration. The ocean, in this way, is our training ground for wonder. And yet, wonder is not enough. The abyss demands responsibility. Each descent carries risks not only to explorers but to the environment itself. Lights disturb bioluminescent rhythms, nets destroy fragile bodies, mining threatens ecosystems unseen. To mistake the deep for empty is to repeat the error of colonial thinking, to assume that what is not visible is not valuable. The deep teaches otherwise. Invisibility is not absence. The unseen is alive and life is fragile. Exploration without reverence becomes destruction. As the vessel ascends once more, the comparison lingers. The surface world greets explorers with sunlight, with clarity, with the familiar. Yet beneath them lies a cosmos within Earth, silent and waiting, as vast in mystery as any distant star. To study it is to hold a mirror to our dreams of space, to recognize that the unknown is not elsewhere but here. The abyss is not simply a frontier. It is a reminder that the universe is already beneath us, infinite in its own way. The waves close again, concealing darkness beneath their glitter. Somewhere below, vents release plumes that shimmer like galaxies. Fish drift with lanterns glowing like stars. Sediments settle like dust across the plains of silence. The ocean is cosmos, and cosmos is ocean. And as the ship moves forward into the night, one cannot help but wonder, when we look upward to the stars, are we searching for what we already have, hidden in the abyss at home? To speak of the deep ocean is to speak of time in a dimension rarely considered. On land, time is marked by seasons, by growth and decay, by the visible cycles of day and night. In the abyss, where sunlight never reaches and change is measured in centuries, time assumes a different shape altogether. Here, patience is not a virtue but a condition of existence. Creatures endure in rhythms so slow they are nearly geological, while sediments settle in layers that become archives of epochs. The deep is less a place of immediacy than of vast duration, a chronicle written in silence. Consider the corals that cling to seamounts, their branches pale as bone. Some colonies have lived for thousands of years, growing at the rate of a few millimeters per year, their skeletons recording subtle chemical shifts in the water. Each layer is a page in a book longer than human history, a book still being written as civilizations rise and fall above. Or the sponges on the abyssal plains, fragile and translucent, some of which may live for 10,000 years, filtering water in patience beyond comprehension. For them, time is not experienced as change but as continuity, survival woven into endurance. The animals of the deep move to similar rhythms. The Greenland shark, one of the most mysterious creatures known, glides slowly through the darkness with a lifespan that may reach 4 or 5 centuries. Born in waters older than many nations, it matures at an age when humans have already grown old, reproducing only after a century has passed. Its body bears the marks of centuries, scars from encounters with predators long gone, the slow accumulation of parasitic companions. To meet such a creature is to meet not an individual but a living piece of time itself, an organism that has witnessed centuries of change while dwelling in darkness. Even smaller beings embody this patience. Amphipods scavenging in trenches may survive on minimal resources, slowing their metabolisms to the faintest flicker of activity, waiting months for food to arrive. Some microbes in sediments appear nearly dormant, yet alive, dividing only once every 100 years, existing at the edge of stasis. In these rhythms, the abyss reveals an alternative logic of survival, one that resists the surface world's urgency. Here, to endure is to stretch existence across spans so long they appear eternal. This altered sense of time is not confined to biology. Geology too plays its role, sculpting the seafloor in intervals far beyond human reckoning. Sediments accumulate grain by grain, recording volcanic eruptions, ice ages, extinctions. Trenches deepen as tectonic plates grind together, reshaping landscapes across millions of years. Vents open and collapse in cycles older than cities, their communities extinguished and reborn in slow cadence. The ocean floor is a palimpsest of histories, each layer writing over the last yet never fully erasing. To read it is to glimpse the deep time of Earth, a scale so immense it dwarfs even imagination. And yet, amid this vast patience, moments of sudden transformation also occur. A whale falls, and within days the seafloor is transformed into a bustling oasis of life. Earthquakes trigger landslides that reshape canyons in minutes. Volcanic eruptions spew plumes that alter chemistry overnight. In these moments, time in the abyss collapses into urgency, revealing the paradox of a world both glacial and immediate. The deep teaches that time is not singular, but layered, that endurance and rupture coexist in silence. For humanity, this perspective is disorienting. Our societies measure progress in years, policies in decades, civilizations in millennia, but the abyss measures in tens of thousands, in millions. It reminds us that we are newcomers in a story written long before us, participants in cycles that will continue long after we are gone. The abyssal plains will accumulate the bones of whales and fish whether or not humans endure. Corals will continue their slow growth even as empires vanish. Time in the deep does not hinge on our presence, and yet paradoxically human activity now intrudes upon this slow rhythm. Carbon emissions, once sequestered for millennia, are being released in mere centuries. Sediments that would have lain undisturbed for ages are stirred by trawling nets and threatened by mining machines. Plastics, synthetic and indestructible, settle into layers that will persist for thousands of years, forming a new geological stratum, the Anthropocene, etched into the seafloor. In this way, humanity has become a force not only of the surface but of the abyss, inscribing its presence into the slow language of deep time. This inscription raises questions as profound as any myth. What does it mean to alter a system that was not shaped for us, that does not measure life as we do? The abyss has endured ice ages, extinctions, tectonic upheavals, but its endurance has always been slow, patient, resilient. Human change, by contrast, is fast, disruptive, consuming. To overlay urgency onto patience is to create imbalance, a dissonance whose consequences are not yet known. The abyss will outlast humanity, but the cost may be its transformation into something unrecognizable. Yet even in this dissonance, the deep offers lessons. Its creatures embody strategies of survival that challenge our assumptions. Endurance without haste, adaptation without conquest, coexistence with extremes. The Greenland shark drifts slowly, consuming little, surviving long. The microbes divide only when they must, conserving energy across centuries. The corals build patiently, creating vast structures from increments too small to notice. These are not lessons of expansion but of restraint, of endurance without domination. Perhaps, in listening to the abyss, humanity might learn to measure progress not in speed but in continuity, not in conquest but in survival across time. The mythology of the deep has always spoken of timelessness, of leviathans older than mountains, of seas without bottom, of eternity hidden beneath waves. Today, science confirms that mythology in unexpected ways. The abyss is indeed timeless, not because it does not change, but because it changes in rhythms beyond human comprehension. Its patience is a form of eternity, one that humbles ambition and reframes meaning. When explorers rise again from the darkness, carrying samples and footage, what lingers is not only the memory of strange creatures or unfamiliar landscapes. It is the sense of having touched another kind of time, a time vast and indifferent yet alive. The deep ocean is not only a place of distance but of duration, a reminder that existence is not measured only in years but in centuries, in millennia, in epochs. As the vessel breaks the surface, daylight floods back in, erasing the weight of darkness. But the awareness remains. Beneath the waves, time continues in silence, stretching backward and forward beyond imagination. And in that silence lies both a warning and an invitation, a warning that urgency can shatter patience, but also an invitation to imagine survival not as haste, but as endurance. The ocean closes once more, calm above, eternal below. Somewhere in its trenches, a shark glides slowly. A coral grows imperceptibly, a microbe divides after centuries. Time flows differently there, reminding us that the deep is not only mystery but measure, a measure of what it means to exist, to endure, to belong to a planet older and larger than ourselves. To descend into the abyss is to enter a realm where light has no dominion, but paradoxically it is also a place where light is reborn. Bioluminescence, the production of light by living organisms, illuminates the dark like constellations scattered across a vast night sky. In the deep ocean, where sunlight cannot penetrate, creatures manufacture their own stars. This phenomenon is not rare but widespread, an evolutionary answer to the challenges of life in perpetual darkness. Nearly 90% of deep-sea species are believed to produce light, turning the abyss into a universe of flickers, pulses, and glows. Each flash has purpose. For some, it is camouflage, a way of erasing the silhouette against faint glimmers of starlight filtering from above. Lanternfish, among the most abundant creatures in the ocean, line their bellies with photophores, organs of light, arranged in patterns that match the faint light overhead. From below, they disappear, vanishing into invisibility. For others, bioluminescence is a lure. The anglerfish dangles its glowing lure before its mouth, attracting curious prey into the trap of its teeth. The gulper eel unrolls its massive jaw, illuminated by faint glimmers, waiting for creatures drawn to the strange spectacle. And some use light for confusion. A squid may release a glowing cloud, dazzling predators long enough to escape into the shadows. But bioluminescence is more than defense or attack. It is communication. Some species flash in rhythms, signals that may serve as mating calls or warnings. Others glow in synchrony, creating waves of light that ripple through schools of fish like the aurora beneath the sea. Shrimp release bursts that illuminate the darkness like underwater lightning, startling both prey and predator. These displays, fleeting and ephemeral, create a hidden language where vision is otherwise useless. In the abyss, light is more than sight. It is speech. The chemistry of bioluminescence is itself astonishing. It relies on luciferin, a light-emitting molecule, and luciferase, the enzyme that triggers the reaction. These reactions are remarkably efficient, producing almost no heat. Cold light, perfectly adapted for survival where energy is scarce. In some creatures, symbiotic bacteria generate the glow, living in specialized organs in exchange for nutrients. In others, the light is produced directly by the animal's own cells. Different wavelengths serve different purposes. Blue-green light travels farthest through seawater, while red, almost invisible in the abyss, becomes a secret code for species that can perceive it. Evolution has sculpted light into a tool more diverse and sophisticated than any human technology. Yet bioluminescence is not simply spectacle, it shapes the very ecology of the deep. Entire food webs are structured around these flashes. Predators track prey through faint glows, prey avoid detection by counter-illumination, and communities communicate across the dark. The abyss is alive with signalling, a constant dialogue invisible to human eyes without special instruments. To glimpse it is to see the deep not as emptiness but as theatre, each performance lasting only seconds, yet repeated across millennia. For humanity, these revelations carry both wonder and irony. For centuries, sailors spoke of glowing seas, of waves shimmering with light, of mysterious creatures flashing in the dark. These tales were dismissed as exaggerations, yet science now confirms them, though on a scale grander than imagined. Satellite images reveal entire regions glowing faintly at night, caused by blooms of bioluminescent plankton stretching for hundreds of miles. These milky seas turn the ocean into a canvas of pale fire, visible even from space. What once was myth is now reality, and reality exceeds the myth. Still, the true magnitude of bioluminescence remains hidden. Submersibles glimpse flashes, but only in narrow cones of light. Nets destroy delicate organs before they can be studied. Cameras record only fragments, missing the full choreography of displays. The abyss reveals enough to tantalize, but never enough to satisfy. Even now, many species' light-producing mechanisms are poorly understood, their purposes speculative. The deep guards its secrets with every flicker, offering only glimpses to those who dare intrude. And yet, even these glimpses have reshaped science. Bioluminescent proteins, like green fluorescent protein discovered in jellyfish, have revolutionized medicine, allowing researchers to track genes, cells, and diseases with glowing markers. Enzymes from light-producing bacteria are used in diagnostics, imaging, and biotechnology. The ocean's hidden light has become a tool for human knowledge, a gift from the abyss applied to the surface world. This intersection of biology and technology illustrates the paradox of exploration. The deep resists, yet it also transforms our understanding in ways both practical and profound. But there is another deeper resonance. Bioluminescence transforms the abyss from emptiness into cosmos. To descend into the deep and see creatures glowing in darkness is to see stars reborn in water, galaxies of life floating in pressure and silence. The parallel is more than metaphor. Just as stars burn with energy in the vacuum of space, these creatures burn with light in the void of the ocean. Both remind us that life, whether cosmic or earthly, defies darkness with brilliance. The abyss in this sense is not merely alien, it is universal, and yet this brilliance is fragile. As human activity alters the ocean, bioluminescent creatures are not spared. Pollution interferes with chemical reactions. Plastics clog organisms that drift through the water. Noise disrupts patterns of behaviour. The deeper the intrusion, the more this delicate symphony risks being muted. Unlike stars, which burn until they collapse, bioluminescence can vanish in silence, extinguished by forces unaware of its existence. Its survival depends not only on evolution, but on restraint, a quality humanity has rarely mastered. To see bioluminescence is to be reminded of scale. These flashes, though brief, connect the smallest plankton to the largest whales, the shallowest waves to the deepest trenches. They reveal an interconnectedness invisible by day. A lanternfish's glow is not separate from a blue whale song. Both are signals woven into a single oceanic fabric, threads binding life across dimensions. The ocean does not separate light and dark, silence and sound, life and death. It binds them in rhythms we're only beginning to perceive. As explorers rise once more, carrying footage of faint glimmers and flashes, they carry more than data. They carry the awareness that the abyss is not barren but luminous, not mute but expressive. Its light, though hidden, is abundant, as essential as air, as profound as stars. And in this awareness lies both wonder and warning, that to destroy what glows in darkness is to extinguish not only creatures, but meanings, connections, possibilities. The vessel surfaces, daylight flooding back, but memory lingers. The ocean below is not silent blackness, but a cosmos of living stars, a sky inverted, glowing beneath waves. And as the ship moves forward, the thought takes hold. If the deep is filled with stars of its own making, then to explore it is to stand at the edge of two universes, one above and one below, each infinite, each mysterious, each asking the same unanswerable question. What else lies hidden in the dark? The abyss is not only a realm of endurance and wonder, but also a stage where death itself becomes a kind of architecture. In the deep sea, where resources are scarce and energy is precious, the fall of a single great creature can reshape entire ecosystems for decades. The most dramatic example is the whale fall, when the body of a giant descends into the darkness, drifting slowly through the water until it touches the seafloor. What begins as an end for one life becomes a genesis for thousands more. When a whale dies at the surface, its body bloats with gases and drifts, a floating island of flesh that attracts sharks, seabirds and scavengers. But once those gases dissipate, the carcass sinks, and gravity carries it into the abyss. It may take hours or days to reach the seafloor, during which time smaller creatures feed on its tissues. When it finally lands, it transforms the desolate plains into a sudden abundance. In the first stage, large scavengers arrive. Hagfish knot themselves into writhing coils to tear at flesh. Giant isopods crawl over bones with slow determination, and sleeper sharks circle in silence. In weeks, a mass that once weighed 30 tons is stripped to skeleton. The second stage belongs to smaller organisms. Crustaceans and worms colonize the remains, feeding on scraps of tissue missed by the larger scavengers. Crabs pick through cavities, snails consume fragments, shrimp swarm like sparks across bone. Over months, the skeleton becomes a reef, a structure that shelters and sustains. Communities form that would never exist without this gift from above. And then comes the third stage, the most extraordinary of all, the arrival of specialized life that thrives on what seems impossible. Bacteria colonize the bones, breaking down lipids and producing hydrogen sulfide, a chemical toxic to most, but nourishing to those adapted to it. Around these bacteria gather tubeworms, clams, and strange polychaetes, creating ecosystems powered not by sunlight or flesh, but by chemistry. This stage can last decades, with communities flourishing on a skeleton long after the memory of the whale itself has vanished. The fall of a single creature becomes a cathedral of survival, an oasis of life in an endless desert. Whale falls are not the only example of such transformations. In the trenches and plains of the deep, the death of any large organism, from giant squid to fish schools, creates a pulse of abundance. Even logs that sink from rivers, called woodfalls, sustain specialized communities of mollusks and microbes that feed on cellulose. Everything that descends becomes seed for an ecosystem, proof that in the abyss, death is never only an ending. It is redistribution, transformation, continuity. For humanity, these processes are difficult to witness directly, but submersibles and remotely operated vehicles have recorded them in haunting detail. A skeleton glowing white on the seafloor, surrounded by writhing worms and crabs, is both eerie and awe-inspiring. It is a reminder that the abyss is not static, but cyclical, its silence punctuated by events that ripple across decades. It also reframes the meaning of mortality. On land, death often feels final, but in the deep, death becomes architecture, foundation, renewal. This perspective reaches beyond biology into philosophy. The Abyss teaches that endings are not absolute, that matter persists, that absence is another form of presence. In a world where time is stretched over centuries, the fall of a whale is not tragedy but transition. Even in darkness, life reorganizes itself, finding opportunity in decay. The deep transforms fear of death into recognition of continuity, a lesson that unsettles and consoles at once. Yet the whale fall also reminds us of fragility. Whales, once hunted nearly to extinction, now carry populations diminished from what they once were. Before industrial whaling, millions roamed the seas, and their deaths seeded the abyss with abundance. Today, with fewer whales, fewer falls occur, and the ecosystems that depend on them are diminished. This invisible loss ripples across the deep, a reminder that human choices shape not only surface life, but life hidden in trenches. The extinction of a species above reverberates far below, severing threads we didn't even know existed. The same is true of other resources that descend. Pollution too falls, but it does not nourish. Plastics drift downward, filling the stomachs of scavengers that mistake them for food. Chemicals settle into sediments, altering microbial processes. Metals from mines and factories bleed into currents, embedding themselves in the skeleton of the seafloor. Death once seeded life, but now debris often seeds disruption. The abyss receives all without discrimination, transforming both sustenance and waste into its cycles, and yet life endures. Even polluted, even diminished, the deep reshapes what arrives. Microbes evolve to digest new compounds, scavengers adapt their diets, ecosystems reorganize, resilience persists though altered. The abyss bends but does not break. Its silence absorbs not only the memory of whales, but the consequences of humanity. The question is not whether it can endure, but what will endure within it. For explorers, witnessing these cycles is transformative. To watch a whale fall is to see mortality rewritten, to see death as an engine of abundance. To record microbes feasting on bone is to glimpse a world indifferent to sentiment but alive with persistence. These observations challenge the surface world's assumptions about value, progress, and permanence. They suggest that the ocean, in its darkness, teaches lessons about life that reach far beyond biology. And so, the whale fall becomes more than an ecological event. It becomes metaphor. It reveals that endings create beginnings, that silence contains sound, that darkness harbours light. It reminds us that the deep is not only a place but a philosophy, one written in pressure, patience, and transformation. To understand it is not only to learn about creatures, but to reflect on mortality itself. As the vessel ascends again, carrying images of bones surrounded by life, the awareness lingers. The abyss does not fear death. It weaves it into continuity. The whale's body, once drifting in light, now anchors ecosystems in shadow. Life persists, not in defiance of endings, but because of them. The ocean closes above, calm and bright, while below, bones still glow in silence, sustaining creatures unseen. And as the ship moves forward, one thought rises with the waves. If the abyss can transform death into architecture, what transformations of life and meaning remain hidden still, waiting in the dark? The abyss is not only a domain of biology and geology, but also a place where memory takes physical form. The deep ocean floor serves as an archive of human history, just as much as it records natural history. In its silence and pressure, it has become the resting place of ships, aircraft, and artifacts, fragments of wars, exploration, and commerce swallowed by the waves and preserved in darkness. Unlike land, where ruins crumble and winds erode, the deep can preserve structures for centuries, sometimes millennia, turning tragedy into monument and memory into geology. Among the most haunting of these archives are the wrecks of war. The Titanic, lying more than 12,000 feet below the surface of the North Atlantic, is perhaps the most famous. Discovered in 1985, it rests split in two, surrounded by debris that tells the story of a single night of catastrophe. Chairs, shoes, porcelain dishes, all scattered on the seabed, preserved like relics of a vanished world. Bacteria slowly consume the steel, creating rusticles that drip like icicles from its hull, but the ship endures as both grave and museum. Each visit by submersible cameras stirs awe and unease, a reminder of the ocean's indifference to human ambition. Other wrecks speak more directly of violence. In the Pacific, the remains of naval fleets from World War II lie entombed, their hulls twisted by fire and torpedoes. Planes still rest on the seafloor, cockpits intact, propellers frozen in mud. These wrecks are not only historical but ecological. Coral has colonized steel, fish weave through shattered windows, sharks patrol decks where sailors once stood. The ocean transforms destruction into reef, violence into habitat. Yet the wrecks remain charged with memory, symbols of conflict preserved in the language of rust and coral. Beyond war, the deep also holds records of commerce. Merchant ships that vanished in storms centuries ago still lie on seabeds, their cargoes intact. Amphorae filled with ancient oil or wine, coins stacked in neat piles, anchors embedded in silt. These artifacts remind us that human history has always been tied to the sea. Some wrecks date back to ancient Rome, or even earlier, proving that the abyss has long been a witness to ambition and loss. Each discovery extends history backward, showing how ocean and humanity have been entwined far longer than surface maps suggest. But the preservation is not only material, the deep records chemical memory too. Sediments on the ocean floor contain traces of human industry, lead from ancient plumbing, mercury from mining, carbon from burning forests, plastics from modern consumption. Each layer is a time capsule, embedding our presence into geological record. Centuries from now, future beings, whether human or not, will be able to read these layers as clearly as we read the fossilized shells of plankton. Our era will be visible not through monuments, but through chemistry. The Anthropocene inscribed in sediments, polymers, and heavy metals written into the language of mud. This dual role of the abyss, as preserver of human tragedy and recorder of human impact, makes it a mirror of ourselves. The ocean holds our achievements and our errors with equal indifference. It does not curate, it archives. A sunken battleship rests beside a whale skeleton. A layer of microplastics lies atop the iridium layer that marks the extinction of the dinosaurs. In this sense, the deep is less an environment than a library, one whose volumes are written not in words but in bones, steel, and sediment. To study it is to read a history broader than our species, yet one that includes us inescapably. And yet this archive is fragile. The Titanic, once thought invincible in its preservation, is decaying faster than expected. Metal-eating bacteria, warmer currents, and the pressure of visits have accelerated its collapse. Within decades it may vanish entirely, its memory surviving only in images and fragments retrieved. Other wrecks face similar fates. Corrosion, landslides, and biological colonization gradually erase what was once preserved. Even the chemical layers in sediments can be disturbed by trawling, mining, or drilling, erasing records before they can be studied. The abyss does not guarantee permanence. It guarantees only transformation. Still, these remnants carry weight. To descend into the deep and see a ship's wheel, a boot, or a porcelain plate lying in the silt is to experience history without narrative, memory without words. There is no story inscribed except the one the observer brings. The ocean offers fragments, and the imagination fills the silence. In this way, the abyss becomes both witness and judge, reminding us that human endeavour is fragile, that what seems monumental on the surface is vulnerable to the indifference of water. This perspective extends into the future. If humanity endures, future generations may descend to study our ruins, just as we study those of the past. They may find collapsed oil rigs, sunken cities, or even remnants of space exploration vehicles that fall back into the sea. If humanity does not endure, then the abyss will still hold what we leave behind, embedding our existence into sediments. The ocean is patient, and in its patience, it remembers. But this memory is not neutral. It is layered with consequences. The same currents that preserve wrecks also carry pollution. The same sediments that hold amphorae also record toxins. The same trenches that cradle warships also accumulate plastic. The abyss holds both beauty and indictment, both relic and residue. It is not merely history but judgment, a record of what we have done and what we have failed to preserve. For explorers, confronting this archive is often sobering. To find a wreck is to find both triumph and tragedy, to feel the weight of stories embedded in steel and bone. To sample sediments is to read both natural history and human disruption. The abyss reflects us back, stripped of illusion. It does not flatter, but it does not lie. And perhaps this is why the deep resonates so powerfully in imagination. It is not only mystery, but memory. Not only alien, but intimate. To gaze into it is to see both the cosmos and ourselves, both the unknown and the forgotten. The abyss is not merely another world, it is our world, remembered in ways we cannot control. As the vessel rises once more, breaking through waves into light, the awareness lingers. The ocean below holds the bones of whales and the bones of ships, the sediments of extinction and the sediments of industry. It is both grave and cradle, both archive and mirror, and in its silence lies a reminder that what we do, what we build, what we consume, does not vanish. It sinks, it settles, it endures in forms we may never see, but which shape the planet nonetheless. The surface calms, sunlight dances, and the ship moves on. Yet beneath, history waits, patient and vast, holding both triumph and ruin in equal measure. And as the horizon stretches forward, the question remains, when the deep is finally read in full, what story of humanity will it tell? The abyss, for all its mystery, is not immune to human reach. Though we cannot inhabit it, though we can only visit for fleeting hours at a time, our influence seeps downward in currents, sediments, and silence. The deep, once imagined as untouched, is now revealed as a mirror of human presence, altered by actions far above the waves. To descend into the trenches today is to encounter not only creatures adapted to crushing pressures and endless night, but also the imprint of a species that has never belonged there. The paradox is stark. We cannot truly explore the deep, yet we have already changed it. Among the most insidious intrusions is plastic. Microplastics, particles smaller than a grain of rice, drift downward through the water column like an artificial snow. Carried by currents, they spread across the abyssal plains and settle into trenches. Amphipods collected from the Mariana Trench, the deepest point on Earth, have been found with microplastics in their guts. These are organisms that evolved under pressures unimaginable to humans, yet their survival is now intertwined with fragments of bottles, bags, and fibres. The ocean's patience absorbs even this, embedding our waste into ecosystems that once knew only natural snow of plankton and detritus. Chemicals too descend. Mercury from coal burning, pesticides from agriculture, heavy metals from industry, all find their way into the abyss. Predators like deep-sea fish and sharks accumulate these toxins in their tissues over decades, their long lifespans making them vulnerable to bioaccumulation. What was once a sanctuary from the surface is now contaminated by it, transformed into a silent ledger of pollution. Each tissue sample becomes a record of industry, each sediment layer a record of consumption. Noise pollution is another form of intrusion. Sound travels farther in water than in air, and the roar of ships, The blasts of seismic surveys and the hum of underwater infrastructure reach into places where no human has ever physically been. Whales lose contact with their kin, fish scatter from spawning grounds, and the communication networks of the abyssal world are disrupted by sounds that carry no meaning for them. For creatures that rely on the subtle vibrations of the deep, these intrusions are not merely annoyance but disorientation, a shattering of the fabric that sustains survival. Even our ambitions for energy and resources stretch into the deep. Mining proposals target the abyssal plains for polymetallic nodules, clusters of minerals that took millions of years to form. These nodules are more than rocks. They are habitats, anchor points for corals, sponges, and microbial communities. To scrape them from the seafloor would be to erase ecosystems that cannot be replaced, to disturb sediments that have lain untouched since before humanity existed. Plumes of disturbed mud could drift for hundreds of miles, suffocating life in ways invisible from the surface. Yet the hunger for cobalt, nickel, and rare earth elements grows, and the deep is seen as opportunity rather than sanctuary. And then there is climate change, the most pervasive intrusion of all. The abyss has long acted as a carbon sink, absorbing heat and gases from the atmosphere. But as emissions increase, the deep grows warmer, its chemistry altered. Oxygen levels decline, threatening creatures that have endured unchanged for millennia. Currents shift, destabilizing the cycles that regulate climate. In sediments, evidence of past extinctions warns of what happens when oceans lose their balance. Mass die-offs, suffocated waters, life erased on scales beyond imagining. The abyss remembers, and its memory tells of catastrophe. Humanity, knowingly or not, is writing a new chapter into that record, one whose consequences will ripple across ages. Yet amid these intrusions, resilience still emerges. Deep-sea microbes evolve to consume oil from spills, breaking down toxins into sustenance. Organisms adapt to altered chemistries, shifting metabolisms to endure. Some even colonize the very wrecks and waste humans leave behind, transforming debris into habitat. This resilience is real, but it is not infinite. Adaptation comes slowly in the abyss, measured in millennia, not decades. Human change moves too quickly, overwhelming even the patience of the deep. For explorers, the recognition of intrusion transforms the meaning of descent. No longer is the abyss an untouched wilderness, a realm apart. It is part of the Anthropocene, part of the human epoch, altered by presence even without physical occupation. To witness microplastics in amphipods or toxins in sharks is to realize that no frontier remains beyond reach. The deep is not separate from us. It is us, transformed by our choices, bound to our fate. This realization raises unsettling questions. What does it mean to explore a world already altered? Are we discovering the abyss or discovering what we have done to it? Can exploration remain neutral when the very act of intrusion brings consequence? Each descent becomes not only a scientific mission, but an ethical one, framed by responsibility as much as curiosity. The abyss forces humanity to confront not only its limits of knowledge, but also its limits of stewardship. And perhaps this is the deeper lesson, that mystery cannot be preserved without reverence. To explore without humility is to destroy. To intrude without restraint is to silence. The abyss resists mastery, but it cannot resist influence. It absorbs what falls from above, whether bone or plastic, whether whale or waste. Its patience makes it seem infinite, but patience is not immunity. For those who descend, the silence becomes heavy with awareness. To gaze upon a plastic fragment lying beside a deep-sea sponge, or to record toxins embedded in a shark centuries old, is to see humanity reflected in the abyss. The ocean becomes not only alien but intimate, holding our history, our debris, our mistakes. Its darkness is no longer wholly other. It is partly our own. And yet, in this recognition lies possibility. If the abyss can record our failures, it can also record our restraint. If it can absorb our waste, it can also absorb our protection. To leave parts of it untouched, to respect its fragility, to temper ambition with reverence. These choices too will be inscribed in sediments, remembered in silence. The abyss will endure regardless, but the form of its endurance remains partly in our hands. As the vessel rises back into the light, carrying data and samples, the awareness lingers like pressure on the chest. The abyss cannot be fully explored, but it can be altered. That paradox defines this moment in history. We cannot conquer it, yet we can damage it. We cannot map it in full, yet we can scar it forever. To acknowledge this is not to abandon exploration, but to reshape it. To see it not as conquest, but as dialogue. Not as mastery, but as participation in a system older and larger than ourselves. The waves close again, calm on the surface, silent below. Somewhere in the trenches an amphipod drifts with plastic in its gut. A shark carries toxins in its flesh. Microbes metabolize chemicals never known before. The abyss remembers, and as the ship moves on, the thought persists. What kind of memory are we leaving in the ocean's silence, and how will it be read in the millennia to come? The abyss, with its silence and immensity, has always invited imagination. Long before the first submersible descended into the trenches, long before sonar mapped the contours of the seafloor, human cultures filled the ocean's darkness with stories. Myths, legends, and fears spilled into its depths, transforming what was unseen into symbols of chaos, creation, or terror. These narratives were not idle invention. They were the mind's way of grappling with the unknown. Even today, when science replaces myth with data, the abyss continues to function as metaphor, a canvas for what humanity cannot fully comprehend. In ancient Mesopotamia, the ocean was chaos itself. The goddess Tiamat, depicted as a monstrous sea serpent, embodied the primordial waters from which the cosmos was born. Her defeat by Marduk was not only the triumph of order over chaos, but also the taming of the sea as symbol of the untamed. In Greek mythology, Oceanus encircled the world, a river without end, while Poseidon's wrath could unleash storms and earthquakes. To Norse seafarers, Jörmungandr, the world's serpent, lay coiled beneath the waves, its stirring capable of summoning tsunamis and quakes. In Polynesian traditions, the ocean was alive with spirits, navigated not just by stars but by respect for forces that dwelled unseen. These myths echo a common truth. The ocean was never perceived as passive. It was alive, dangerous, and generative. It held monsters because it held mystery, and mystery always invites fear. Sailors across centuries spoke of krakens rising from the depths, of mermaids luring men to their doom, of ghost ships crewed by the dead. These tales grew from real encounters, giant squids glimpsed in storms, whales mistaken for islands, the eerie glow of bioluminescent seas. Imagination magnified fragments into legends, giving shape to fears that had no other form. Even in literature, the abyss became symbol. In Homer's Odyssey, the sea is a stage for trials, a metaphor for life's unpredictability. In Melville's Moby Dick, the whale is both real creature and cosmic riddle, embodying the terror of the unknown. Joseph Conrad's seascapes, filled with shadows and dread, treat the ocean as mirror of the human psyche, vast, inscrutable, indifferent. For poets and novelists, the sea was never simply water. It was the unknown itself, a space where human control dissolves. Science, though it strips myths of their literal power, has not erased the symbolic weight of the deep. Instead, it has deepened it. The creatures discovered in the abyss, anglerfish with glowing lures, gulper eels with jaws larger than their bodies, siphonophores stretching longer than blue whales, are no less strange than the krakens and leviathans of old. They confirm that the abyss is alien, that imagination was not mistaken in sensing monstrosity where eyes could not see. The line between myth and science is blurred, not because myths are factual, but because both recognise that the unknown inspires awe and dread in equal measure. The abyss also resonates as metaphor in philosophy. Thinkers from ancient Greece to modern times have used the sea as symbol for the unconscious, for the unseen depths of the human mind. Freud described the psyche as an iceberg, most of it submerged, hidden from awareness. Jung saw the ocean as collective unconscious, a reservoir of archetypes and myths shared across humanity. To descend into the abyss is thus to descend into oneself, to confront the unknown not only in the world, but in the mind. The pressure, the silence, the absence of light. These become metaphors for repression, memory, fear. The abyss is both external and internal, both ocean and soul. This symbolic power persists in modern culture. Films depict the deep as site of horror or revelation, monstrous creatures lurking in darkness, alien intelligences hiding beneath waves, ancient ruins waiting to be uncovered. Documentaries emphasize its strangeness, painting it as Earth's final frontier. Even technology borrows its imagery, software named Kraken, companies adopting logos for tentacles, metaphors of depth used to describe complexity. The abyss has become shorthand for the unknowable, a symbol as potent in digital age as in myth. Yet this symbolism carries responsibility. To imagine the abyss as monstrous alone risks justifying exploitation. If it is alien, then it is other, and if it is other, then it can be consumed. Myths of conquest can translate into acts of conquest. The truth, however, is more complex. The abyss is not monster but ecosystem, not void but foundation. Its symbolic power must not obscure its reality, for its reality is what sustains life above. To see it only as metaphor is to miss its role as climate regulator, carbon sink and archive of history. And still, the metaphor matters. It shapes how humanity perceives the ocean, how it approaches exploration, how it imagines responsibility. If the abyss is chaos, it must be controlled. If it is monster, it must be slain. But if it is mirror, then perhaps it must be respected. If it is cosmos within Earth, then perhaps it must be preserved. The choice of metaphor shapes the choice of action, just as myths once guided seafarers through storms. Perhaps the most haunting metaphor of all is the abyss's future. As climate change accelerates, as seas rise, as ecosystems shift, the ocean increasingly symbolizes what is coming: unpredictability, transformation, upheaval. To look into its depths is to look forward as much as downward, to glimpse not only what lies hidden, but what lies ahead. Its darkness becomes prophecy, its silence a warning. In this way, the abyss is not only past and present, but anticipation, a reminder that humanity's fate is tied to waters it cannot see. And so, the myths continue, not as ancient stories of gods and monsters, but as modern questions. What does it mean to explore what cannot be possessed? What does it mean to alter what cannot be understood? The abyss resists answers, but it compels the asking, and in that compulsion lies its enduring symbolic power. As the submersible rises, leaving trenches behind, the silence of the abyss follows upward. The myths and metaphors resurface, filling the imagination with images old and new. Serpents coiled beneath continents, glowing creatures adrift like galaxies, memories buried in sediment. The ocean is not only water, it is narrative, archive, mirror, prophecy. Its meanings are as deep as its trenches, as vast as its plains. The waves close once more, calm on the surface, infinite below. Somewhere in the dark a fish glows like a lantern, a whale drifts in song, a microbe divides slowly in silence. Each is real, each is symbol, each is part of the story humanity tells about the abyss. and as the ship moves forward into night, the thought lingers. Perhaps the ocean's truest mystery is not what lies within it, but why it continues to live inside us, shaping the way we dream. The abyss is more than an archive of the planet's past or a stage for strange forms of life. It is also a theatre of vulnerability. For all its endurance and indifference, the deep ocean is not immune to change. In fact, it is already shifting in ways subtle and profound, carrying signs of transformation that ripple outward into the world above. The abyss may feel immutable, but beneath its silence lies instability, an unfolding drama that threatens not only the creatures of darkness, but the balance of life across the planet. One of the most pressing transformations is the loss of oxygen. The deep ocean breathes slowly, its circulation replenished only as surface waters sink, carrying oxygen downward. This process takes centuries, sometimes millennia. Yet as the surface warms under the influence of climate change, those circulations weaken. Less oxygen descends, and creatures accustomed to scarcity find even scarcer resources. In some regions, oxygen minimum zones have expanded, creating dead layers where little can survive. To most of humanity, these zones are invisible, but to the abyss, they are fractures in the very fabric of survival. Warming itself poses another threat. The abyss was long considered insulated from surface heat, but studies now show that warmth seeps downward, altering ecosystems built on constancy. Even small shifts in temperature, fractions of a degree, can destabilize species that evolved under unchanging cold. A coral adapted to near-freezing water may bleach and die when warmed slightly, its centuries-long growth undone in a season. Sponges, worms, and delicate creatures of the deep lack the mobility to flee, trapped in place as the environment reshapes around them. For beings that endure across ages, rapid change is catastrophe. Acidity, too, seeps downward. The ocean absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, buffering the climate above but altering chemistry below. As more carbon dissolves, the water grows acidic, eroding shells, dissolving skeletons, and weakening the very creatures that build the seafloor's architecture. Pteropods, small plankton with delicate shells, dissolve in acidified waters, disrupting food webs that stretch upward to fish, whales, and birds. Corals, slow builders of reefs, see their skeletons weaken. The abyss becomes less foundation than fracture, its patience overwhelmed by chemistry outpacing adaptation. Mining looms as yet another pressure, threatening to transform the abyss from sanctuary to quarry. Machines designed to scrape polymetallic nodules, harvest cobalt-rich crusts, and drill hydrothermal vents could soon scar landscapes that have lain untouched for millions of years. The nodules, slow-growing accretions of metals, are not inert but alive with microbial colonies, sheltering invertebrates that depend on their permanence. To remove them is to erase habitats and scatter sediments across plains, smothering creatures in clouds that drift for miles. What would take millions of years to form could vanish in a single generation of extraction. And yet proposals multiply, driven by demand for resources to fuel human technology. The abyss is cast as solution, even as it risks becoming sacrifice. The fragility of these ecosystems lies not only in their uniqueness, but in their pace. Life in the abyss is slow, deliberate, prolonged. Corals live for thousands of years, sharks for centuries, microbes divide once in decades. When disturbed, recovery is not measured in years, but in millennia. A coral forest scraped away by a trawl may not regrow within the span of civilization. A sponge reef buried in sediment may vanish beyond restoration. The abyss, for all its endurance, cannot withstand haste. Human time and deep time collide, and the collision is ruinous. Yet there is another layer to this vulnerability: uncertainty. Scientists admit that knowledge of the abyss remains fragmentary. We do not know how many species live there, how food webs interconnect, how cycles balance. We do not know how ecosystems will respond to pressures already unfolding. The abyss resists measurement, and so the full impact of change remains unknowable. This uncertainty is not comfort but risk, for it means that humanity acts blind, altering what it cannot even name. The abyss is both laboratory and gamble, its silence hiding not stability but unpredictability. And still, in this vulnerability lies resilience. Creatures of the abyss have endured extinction events before, surviving cataclysms that reshape the planet. When meteors struck, when volcanoes darkened skies, when climates shifted, the deep provided refuge. Species retreated into its silence, endured in its cold, and re-emerged when the surface healed. The abyss is a sanctuary, but one that demands respect, for even sanctuaries can be broken when the rate of change outpaces their endurance. For explorers, this duality, fragility and resilience, makes the abyss a place of paradox. To descend is to see life that appears eternal. Corals that predate civilizations, sharks older than empires. Yet beneath that sense of permanence lies precarity, the knowledge that these beings endure not because they are invulnerable, but because their world has been stable. Disturb that stability, and their endurance falters. The abyss becomes less monument than balancing act, fragile in its immensity. This recognition reshapes the meaning of exploration. No longer is the deep merely a frontier of curiosity. It is a frontier of responsibility, one that forces questions about humanity's role. Do we descend to understand or to consume? Do we map to protect or to exploit? Each choice inscribes itself into sediments. Each action becomes memory preserved in mud. The abyss does not forget, and its silence records consequences as surely as it records whale bones or volcanic ash. And so, the abyss becomes metaphor once more, not of monsters or myths, but of ethics. Its silence asks questions louder than any voice. Can a species that cannot live in the deep be trusted with its survival? Can exploration coexist with preservation? Can curiosity endure without conquest? These questions have no easy answers, but they persist, echoing in the silence as pressure builds and darkness deepens. As the vessel ascends, leaving behind trenches and plains, the awareness lingers. The abyss is vulnerable, not despite its depth, but because of it. Its endurance is not invincibility. Its resilience not limitless. It depends on patience, on rhythms unbroken, on cycles undisturbed. Humanity in its haste threatens to unravel what took millions of years to weave. To know this is not despair but responsibility, an invitation to imagine exploration not as intrusion but as guardianship. The waves close once more, the surface bright and indifferent. But beneath, oxygen thins, heat seeps, acids rise, nodules wait to be mined. Creatures drift in resilience, corals endure in patience, microbes persist in silence. The abyss remains alive, yet altered, its vulnerability entwined with our choices. And as the ship moves forward under starlight, one thought deepens with the dark. The ocean is not fragile because it is weak, but because it is strong in ways we do not yet understand. What then will happen when that strength is tested beyond what it was ever meant to bear? The abyss has accompanied us through myth, through science, through imagination, and through fear. It is a frontier that refuses conquest, a silence that resists intrusion, a darkness that humbles even the brightest technologies. To journey into its depths is to confront not only strange creatures and geological wonders, but the limits of what it means to be human. The ocean's hidden vastness is not a puzzle waiting to be solved. It is a reminder that some mysteries endure because they must, and that life is shaped not only by what can be known, but by what resists knowledge. Each descent into the deep reinforces this paradox. A submersible shines its beams into blackness, illuminating a handful of shapes before retreating to the surface. Cameras capture fragments of ecosystems that span continents. Instruments record vibrations, temperatures, chemical signatures, but never the whole. The abyss offers glimpses, never clarity. It yields knowledge in flashes, then swallows it back in silence. Exploration becomes less a conquest of facts than a dialogue with the unknown, one where the ocean always speaks last. And yet, these glimpses are enough to remind us of our place. Creatures that glow with their own light, corals older than empires, sharks that drift through centuries, all insist that the human scale is small. Trenches deeper than Everest is tall insist that our monuments are temporary. Vents that sustain life without sunlight insist that the rules we take for granted are not universal. Each discovery widens the horizon of possibility, not by erasing mystery but by enlarging it. The abyss does not shrink with knowledge, it expands. Perhaps that is why the deep ocean resonates so powerfully in culture. We imagine space as the great frontier, but the ocean's abyss is closer, more intimate, and no less alien. To explore it is not to escape Earth, but to discover Earth anew, to realize that our planet holds within it a cosmos of its own. The abyss is both mirror and threshold, mirror of our fragility, threshold to possibilities beyond our imagination. To look downward is to look outward, and to look outward is to realize how little we know. But this humility collides with urgency. For all its immensity, the deep is changing. Warming waters, acidification, declining oxygen, the spread of plastic and pollutants, the looming threat of mining, all reshape ecosystems before they can even be understood. The patience of the abyss collides with the haste of humanity, and the balance tilts. The deep will endure, but what endures may not be the same. It will remember our choices, inscribed in sediments and scars, preserved in silence long after we are gone. The abyss is not fragile because it is weak, but because it is strong in ways incompatible with haste. It thrives in cycles measured in millennia, and we live in decades. That mismatch is the abyss's greatest vulnerability. Exploration, then, cannot be separated from responsibility. To descend is to bear witness, but also to ask, what is the cost of this presence? What will remain after the lights are gone, after the machines withdraw? To explore without reverence is to exploit. To exploit without understanding is to destroy. The abyss demands a different ethic, one rooted in patience, humility, and restraint. It demands that curiosity coexist with care, that ambition yield to endurance, that discovery serve preservation, and perhaps this is the truest lesson of the abyss, that mystery itself has value. In an age where knowledge is pursued as conquest, where every map is filled, where every frontier is framed as opportunity, the deep resists. It teaches that not all that exists must be mastered, that some silences are necessary, that some darknesses should remain intact. Its resistance is not an obstacle but a gift, reminding us that life is not diminished by mystery but enriched by it. To leave some questions unanswered is not failure, it is respect. This respect does not mean abandonment. The abyss deserves study, deserves listening, deserves reverence. Hydrophones that record whale songs, submersibles that glimpse glowing creatures, instruments that trace ancient sediments, all expand our sense of connection, all deepen our awareness. But they must be tools of listening, not weapons of extraction. To explore is to witness, and to witness is to protect. The abyss is not emptiness but foundation, not other but essential. To care for it is to care for the planet itself. As the vessel rises for the final time, breaking the surface into light, the awareness settles like a weight and a gift. The abyss is not fully knowable, nor should it be. Its darkness endures because its endurance protects us, because its silence sustains us, because its patience humbles us. The ocean's hidden world is not a resource to be consumed, but a truth to be honoured, that life thrives not only in light but in shadow, not only in clarity but in mystery. The waves close behind the submersible, erasing the trace of descent. The surface glitters, the horizon stretches, the stars emerge above. But beneath, the abyss remains, endless, patient, alive. Somewhere in its silence a lanternfish glows, a coral grows another millimetre, a shark drifts through its 4th century. Life continues, indifferent and magnificent, reminding us that exploration is not about possession, but about perspective. And so the story circles back to its beginning. We stand on the shore gazing out at the sea, aware that beneath its calm lies a darkness more vast than sky. We cannot truly explore it, cannot fully know it, cannot master it, but we can listen, we can protect. We can learn from its silence. The abyss remains, and in its resistance lies the lesson we need most, that not everything must yield, that some mysteries endure so that life itself can endure. The ocean is not simply water, not simply depth. It is memory, resilience, vulnerability, and possibility. Its abyss is the dark side of our planet, not because it hides, but because it reminds us of the limits of our reach and the fragility of our survival. To honour it is to honour Earth itself, to recognise that in the silence of the deep lies the foundation of life above. The waves roll on, timeless and indifferent. Beneath them, the abyss breathes in darkness. And as night deepens, one thought remains. The ocean does not belong to us, but we belong to it. To understand that is not to conquer the abyss, but to finally hear what it has been saying all along.